is one of the biggest stories coming out of the January 6th riots. The loss of life for Officer Sicknick. It's a sad story, and my respect and condolences to his family, but it looks like now the New York Times has essentially retracted the claims they made early on that this officer died due to essentially blunt force trauma to the head from a fire extinguisher. Now, as soon as impeachment is over, they basically come out and retract it, saying, actually, that didn't happen. And the official reporting from local news is that, or I don't know which, I don't think it's the U.S. D.C. local news. I think it was out of Houston, but they reported the man died of an unrelated stroke. This was the big story, that violent and angry Trump supporters brutally and mercilessly beat this cop and ultimately killed him. And it was one of the biggest arguments in the impeachment. It just was not true. So I can't say I'm surprised, but I do feel a little disappointed in myself because I believed it too. We talked about it several times on this show, and it was just a whole lot of BS. So we'll talk basically about this, a little bit about impeachment, the doctoring of evidence in the impeachment trial, which I believe ultimately led to the whole thing just spiraling out of control and collapsing. And we got some other news too. Biden has gone pretty hard in favor of gun control, which most of us already knew he was going to do, but he's made the official call. And we do have H.R. 127 now preparing to enter committee, which is a pretty drastic gun control legislation. So we'll talk about this and a bunch of other things. We've got two guests tonight. Joining us, of course, once again, is Will Chamberlain.
Good to see you.
So who are you? What are you doing here?
Well, I'm the co-publisher of Human Events, and I'm also senior counsel at the Internet Accountability Project, which fights against the abuses of big tech, as well as the Article 3 Project, which was dedicated to getting Trump's justices confirmed. Now I think we're a little more about opposing Biden's judges. But so that's sort of my general work.
You're also fighting for social media access as a civil right?
That's correct. I mean, that's part of my work at Internet Accountability Project. I've long said I think it should be conceptualized, the ability to use Facebook and Twitter as a civil right.
Well, Parler's back, so that's more big news.
Yeah, I mean, a good question about whether people will come back.
I made two parlays. Is that what it is? Two parlays? Mm-hmm. And then the site got hugged to death. So I think they don't have the capacity they once did. Back when they were on Amazon, they had all this capacity. Now everybody rushes back in when the news breaks, and then the site can't handle it.
Right, exactly, which is why maybe Amazon shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. So we have another guest, but Will, why don't you introduce our other guest?
Well, my lovely fiance is joining us on the podcast. Jordan Lancaster is a reporter at the Daily Caller, and a much more savage than me on Twitter.
She's great.
You want to just give us a brief intro? What do you do?
I'm a reporter at the Daily Caller. I just pretty much write about everything: breaking news, politics. Go on social media, tweet too much. That's pretty much it.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
And we also got Luke Rutkowski as per usual.
Brutal on Twitter, by the way. Congratulations. also, Tim. What does the government do once it disarms its citizenry?
Gulags.
No. Whatever they want. Mm-hmm. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name is Luke Rutkowski of WeAreChange.org. I am your humble T-shirt vendor, and you could purchase the T-shirts that I wear on this show. Another fraudulent slip on the bestpoliticalshirts.com. Thebestpoliticalshirts.com. Thanks so much for supporting me and having me.
What did you just say?
Floridian slip.
Floridian slip?
Like a mix of Freud and Foucault.
I know.
Yeah, it's a mix. It's quite the fusion.
It's 5D, trickery here.
Yeah,
you guys.
Okay.
Yeah,
he made everybody remember his phrase.
Exactly.
It was like,
it's true.
They used to do these advertisements back in the day that were almost like optical illusions. So like a good example is there was a picture of a girl on a swing with 3 legs. And the idea was that when you're flipping the page of the magazine, your brain would notice this like oddity, but you wouldn't think twice, but then your brain would remember it. So they would purposefully make these weird images that people would be like, oh, that's weird. What are they doing? Like, is it 3 legs? That's what Luke's doing.
And
He's
it
trying
would grab
to
your
manipulate
attention. Now you're going to be talking about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, let me grab your attention for a minute, my friends. Before we get into all that news talk, go to timcast.com and become a member. We've got a ton of exclusive podcast segments and even a few full episodes. The latest we did, we talked about new FOIA document proving the U.S. has alien technology and crazy metamaterials, at least according to a UFO expert. So a lot of fun there. And then we got another segment with Matt Brainerd. He's the guy who ran the Voter Integrity Project, and he talked to us about his upcoming report on illegal ballots in Georgia. And he made a pretty bold statement, which we'll leave to that segment. That whole news will be coming out in the next week or so. But for members, you can go check it out. And being a member helps support the channel in the event that we get banned, because we talk about things that, they basically ban people for. It may come soon. By being a member, you'll be able to access all of our content in the event we get wiped out. That's where we will be. But that being said, let's jump to the big news story. It really breaks my heart. The National Review reports the Times corrects the record on Officer Sicknick's death, sort of. The gist of the story, the officer who lost his life, it was an unrelated stroke. They say, a few days ago, the New York Times quietly updated its report, published over a month earlier, asserting that Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick had been killed by being struck with a fire extinguisher during the January 6th riot. According to the update, quote, new information has emerged regarding the death of the Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick that questions the initial cause of his death provided by officials close to the Capitol Police. They say, as I detailed in a column last week, what the Times calls new information actually began emerging the same day the paper filed its January 8th report. More importantly, they initially said law enforcement sources. Now they're saying officials close to the Capitol Police. What is that? Muriel Bowser, the D.C. mayor? Could it be like a homeless guy who's next to the police department? That's one thing I always pointed out when they say close to. What does that even mean? Well, they say official, I suppose. So at least it's somebody who's working. They say that report was and still is entitled Capitol Police Officer Dies from Injuries in Pro-Trump Rampage. It was not the only such Times report from that day. There was another entitled, quote, he dreamed of being a police officer, then was killed by a pro-Trump mob, in which the Times asserted on Wednesday, pro-Trump supporters attacked the citadel of democracy, overpowered Mr. Sicknick, 42, and struck him in the head with a fire extinguisher. According to two law enforcement officials, with a bloody gash in his head, Mr. Sicknick was rushed to the hospital and placed on life support. He died on Thursday evening. But they mention KHOU he reported he had died from a stroke. The story made no mention of the officer being struck by a fire extinguisher. It did claim, however, that the stroke occurred at the Capitol during the riots, and a caption under the officer's photograph stated that he died of injuries sustained during the riot at the Capitol. Isn't it amazing how they do that? Check this out. We have the actual article from KHOU 11. U.S. Capitol Police Officer on life support dies after suffering stroke following riots, Union Chair said. This is from January 8th. I mean, I got to be honest. How did I miss this? I mean, this story's old. Yet this was one of the big aspects of the whole impeachment process. The officer who lost his life, they did this big event where they brought him into the Capitol building to lay him to rest. Should we be surprised by this?
No, not at all. I mean, the New York Times went into detail. They talked about a bloody head, blunt force trauma, critical in condition, rushed to the hospital, and now we're finding out all of that. What was that based on? Absolutely nothing. Where's the responsibility? Where's the accountability? YouTube, should Facebook, Twitter, go after these people for knowingly spreading fake news. If you're going to apply this against, the average Joe, your independent media, apply it to them. Whenever there's anonymous sources, I always say there's always reason to be skeptical, and they use anonymous sources. There was videos showing a fire extinguisher flying around, but imagine being a reporter at the New York Times, right? And then just totally fabricating this story. I mean, they're talking about their two sources. Who are their sources? There should be revealed.
They should burn them, right?
Yeah.
Like their sources lied to them.
Yeah.
So either they're okay with that being lied to about what's effectively blood libel, right? You're accusing a political movement of murder falsely.
I have some break. Oh, go ahead, Luke.
Or they did what the mainstream media usually does, and they fabricate and make up sources that are not there at all. So they do this a lot in the mainstream media. So go ahead.
I have breaking news. It is now confirmed to me from a source close to Nancy Pelosi's office in San Francisco that she is in fact a fascist who is, selling us out to massive corporations, and she is personally taking bribes from others close to her office. Now, this source close to her office is a homeless guy in the alley, behind her building, and he seems to be a bit out of it. I think he's not getting his proper medication. You see the point I'm trying to make?
Yeah.
Clever word. Obviously, I don't have any confirmation on Nancy Pelosi being corrupt or whatever. Well, actually, I mean, just read the news and you might come to that conclusion. The point I'm making is this kind of stuff happens all the time, and the New York Times lies all the time. And it's funny that the story came out a month and a half ago, and the New York Times is only just now updating it.
And it's not even admitting fault. It's just saying, well, there's other sources saying something different. Like, you would think that you'd be able to confirm or deny the story about him being the victim of blunt force trauma. That's either true or it's not. And a month after his death, we would know the answer to that question.
The crazy thing is that, I got to be honest, I think a lot of us missed this. I particularly missed it. And it's because we don't read local news. Local news is hurting really bad. Their ad rates are drying up, and people are sending their money to the New York Times. So it really is true that we need good journalists to help us understand what's going on right now. Well, just going on in general. And because local news is suffering, more and more people want the national story. More and more people are attracted to the orange man bad narrative. They ignore what's happening around them. Then you have these smaller outlets who actually reach out to the union, find out what really happened. And how is it that we've now gone into an impeachment a month later with this narrative? Like when they laid Officer Sicknick to rest in the Capitol, it was well after it was reported he just died from a stroke.
So remember when this first happened and we were talking about it, and somebody in the chat was like, he's actually not dead yet. We're like, he has already died.
That's
Because
right.
that was what was first reported, was that he was gone, like, as soon as this happened. And that right from the get-go, it was inconsistent what they were talking about, whether he was actually gone or not, and they couldn't make up their minds.
He was on life support.
Yeah.
I mean, this is supposed to be the paper of record. If the journalist isn't willing to burn their anonymous sources, the journalist should be fired. Like, I mean, you're trying to, I don't know. I mean, it's we shouldn't be surprised that the New York Times is Media Matters, but like it still is. It still is actually kind of infuriating that they can't even maintain the pretense.
And another thing we have to understand here, this was a very important emotional talking point. We saw a lot of mainstream media figures and also politicians talk about the officer that was beat with a fire extinguisher over its head until he was dead. Beat bloody with a fire extinguisher over and over. Psychological kind of operation, some people would say, to push the bigger point that look how horrible, how evil these people are, when in reality they were caught with their pants down. They were lying about this from the very beginning. And if they're lying about this, what else are they lying about? That's the bigger question Americans should be asking themselves, but they're not. They shouldn't be trusted. And again, I point to, again, the big social tech media companies. They want to combat fight fake news. Fight it right now. Prove them. Give us an example of the mainstream media actually getting a taste of their own medicine.
This is why it's so important that Parler is coming back, because Twitter suppresses news. These big tech giants suppress news. I mean, Twitter literally shut down the Hunter Biden story, and then they take down Parler with more fake news. So the big claim when Parler got taken down was basically that people were organizing on Parler for the Capitol riot, and that was a lie. So all of this information coming out is a lie.
Yeah, I mean, the good example there was Facebook was far more of the center of that sort of organizing for January 6th. Something like, if you actually look at the criminal indictments, like 80% of them mention organizing on Facebook.
There was plans online to go after the Capitol.
Right.
There's groups, there was individuals publicly talking about this, and then the intelligence agencies, we had no idea, we had no clue. And then when it comes to the inauguration, huge, massive security theater, huge National Guard on the trip, because there is now there is a legitimate threat.
Look, you got to give them some credit. They may have dropped the ball this time, but I mean, they've been particularly diligent in doing their jobs. Like when the noose was found at the NASCAR garage, they were there.
They were on it.
And they were, yes, absolutely. How many were? Like over a dozen.
Yeah.
A dozen FBI
So,
agents.
when we need them most, they're there. I mean, who really cared about the Capitol, right? I mean,
Gosh,
we didn't need them.
Well, there's other reports that I'm seeing that Trump actually requested troops on that day, and he was denied. I still haven't been able to independently verify that.
No, it's true.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mayor Muriel Bowser said she didn't want a massive police presence. When they said they were going to bring in the National Guard, she said she didn't want them to be armed. There were other individuals in DC politics saying like, oh no, and it may be that because of Black Lives Matter and the optics around the police coming in, going after the protesters.
But they were
didn't wanna
guarding the
do it.
White House, pretty diligently. I mean, there was fences around the White House weeks before January 6th. So, something, of course, a lot of people are asking a lot of questions, especially with some of the people that are arrested that had ties to the FBI. Now, I don't want to get all conspiratorial because, again, we have no actual proof or evidence of this. You have a lot of conjecture. You have a lot of people, connecting the dots on certain issues. But I think it's fair to say that there definitely should be a lot more questions about this event.
I think it's pretty demoralizing, man. I use the New York Times all the time, and I generally give them the benefit of the doubt that when they're reporting something, it's likely to be true. Not massively likely. I'm not saying 99%, but at least, come on, 51%?
There's just like a banal awfulness for our institutions right now. I mean, Arendt said something about the banality of evil. I wouldn't call them evil, but They're just awful. They're like not
The banality of
awfulness.
awfulness.
The
level.
banality of
Yeah.
awfulness. They're just so bad at performing their basic function.
I mean, they've been bad though. I wanna sit here and play this whole like Barry Weiss angle. You know, for those unfamiliar, she worked for the Times. She wrote this big letter when she left saying it's like wokeness and critical theory and intolerance taking over. But the reality is the New York Times has been awful for a long time. I mean, the Iraq War,
Yep.
you know,
It's just
weapons of mass
it's
destruction.
gotten worse. I mean, I think the example would be like they broke the Hillary Clinton email story 4 years ago.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
they published the Snowden articles when they came out during the Obama administration. There was I think there's two dynamics. One is, you know, Trump made them all deranged and they became like partisan as opposed to like just liberal, but trying to be objective. And then I think the second thing is, you know, you see all these woke scandals of the New York Times, and I mean, they're so consumed by these internal HR dramas that they've lost their ability to perform their function of being journalists.
Well, now they're constantly writing about themselves.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing.
Well-
There's like another article that came out right now about the New York Times, and I can't remember who, but one of these media reporters.
Ben Smith.
Was
right?
it Ben who
I
was
think.
like the New York Times has become like a reality show where they're just writing articles about their own staff members now? But people are clicking it. That's why they're doing it.
Well, I remember a few years ago hearing about their investigative unit just being totally gutted by new acquisitions to the company. And that makes absolutely sense, because if you don't have the budget to investigate stories or look into stories or research stories, well, you just have to make them up, just like they did in this instance. And I think it's very fair to say that this, I mean, you could say evil, you could say just total ignorance, you could just say total stupidity. Whether it is or isn't, it's still absolutely wrong and bad, and it needs to be called out as much as it can, so people realize that the New York Times is not the newspaper of record. It's the newspaper of whatever special interest or bozo behind it.
No. It's the lowest common denominator of subscribers. So they probably look at their subscriber base, the people who are paying, you know, digitally, and they're like, which one's gonna, you know, attract more people, or which one will be interesting to most of the people who watch, or, you know, who read our stuff. And so, you know, I want to make sure that we don't become like the New York Times, we here at Timcast IRL, which is why we're very seriously looking into setting up a TV commercial for Our Pillow. We're gonna make sure that we use our resources for important things.
That's right.
Like a burlap sack full of packing peanuts that we advertise on primetime cable.
Yes.
Just as sort of like a culture jam, you know, or whatever. But I'm kidding. Actually, we are working towards hiring reporters, and the idea would be, the New York Times is going backwards. That's the way I view it. They're supposed to be using, you know, all this stuff they report on, the funding they get from subscribers should go towards journalism that people probably don't want to hear or might not care about. Instead, what they're doing is they're getting rid of the journalism that people probably don't care about but still needs to be reported, and replacing it with internal drama and conflict. What I want to do here is that we're all sitting here complaining about the New York Times. We don't even do hardcore investigative journalism. So it's like easy for us to criticize. Well, we're going in the right direction in that from a commentary podcast show, we're going to use funding towards actual journalism. And that's kind of the idea. I think they're doing the opposite. But look, I'll give them some respect in that they do journalism. Although I'm pretty concerned about whether I can trust it at this point. And I think, you know, what we want to do is particularly different. We'll have a brand that literally only does journalism. So we'll create a website dedicated specifically to just reporting stuff. And then we can keep the commentary off of that. Otherwise, I don't know, man. I think it's demoralizing.
Yeah.
It is. There is something. It's just like you rely on there being some institutions that remain nonpartisan. I think it's part of a bigger theme. Think about like the ACLU, for example. Everybody was great with the ACLU when they were just always fight free speech cases. You knew that it didn't matter if it was some communist or some terrible white nationalist, whatever it was. If they were having their free speech rights violated, the ACLU would go in and defend them, because they were like, the principle matters more. It's about the right. Now they don't do that. Now they turn down far right clients.
Yep.
Because they're uncomfortable with it.
Well, now they're talking about gender on Twitter.
Right. And I mean, I remember I went to an ACLU event, you know, they were like celebrating their anniversary. They didn't even have a free speech. Like, they didn't even talk about their free speech work.
Whoa.
They're just embarrassed by it now.
Well, they made a lot of money. They made a lot of money opposing Donald Trump. And this is why I've never been a big fan of most nonprofits, because they're corporations. They care about their bottom line. They have customers. The customers, I'll tell you this. I think nonprofits are actually substantially more dangerous than for-profits in not every single one, obviously, but there are good for-profits that do the right thing, that are maybe sustainable and try to avoid polluting. And there are some good nonprofits that tend to be very small and they actually want to help people. But here's what I find with most nonprofits. They are still just corporations. The customer is an individual who wants their hopes and dreams fulfilled, or at least wants to feel like they're doing something. Nonprofits make money by convincing you that you don't have to do anything. You don't got to change your life. You don't have to recycle. You don't have to go and fight for the rights of free speech. Just give me $20 and I'll do it for you. And then they don't. They don't. But they want to make sure that their customers think they're getting a product. That's the crazy thing with a for profit. Like if we're selling pillows, like we actually have one, it's a burlap sack full of packing peanuts. I actually have to give you a sack full of packing peanuts. Otherwise, you're like, yo, where's my product? Not the nonprofits, not ACLU, and especially not the New York Times. This is the crazy thing about the news industry. If you call a plumber because your toilet breaks, right? Plumber comes in, fixes your toilet. You walk over, you flush it. It works. You say, okay, my toilet works. Here's your money. One day you call the plumber, your toilet doesn't work. He says, I fixed your toilet. Take my word for it. You flush it, nothing happens. You say, bro, I'm not paying you. How do you know the New York Times or any other news organization is doing their job? How can you tell the article is exactly what you asked for in terms of a product, legitimate information? You can't check it.
I mean, you can only guess. And I mean, you can infer from the fact that when they actually report something that's in your area of expertise, it's wrong.
Right.
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 The
Like
Gell-Mann amnesia
the
effect.
Gell-Mann amnesia effect.
Yeah.
I mean, that keeps happening. You just see them report something. I remember doing this. I remember it was during the Flynn case, and I went to a hearing and, watched how Judge Sullivan handled the defendants and, came out of that hearing, and I was there, and then I watched all the news stations report it wrong. Like it was just their description. I mean, it was true insofar as they weren't making explicit factual errors, but their entire description of it was super misleading.
That's how it is.
Yeah.
During the last show when we did Super Chat, someone asked us this question, like, how do we trust what we read? And I went off on a tangent, but one of the things I said, if it's an anonymous source, there's a lot of reason to be skeptical. Another thing you really have to ask yourself when you're reading the news, whether it's even from independent or mainstream media, is who benefits? Who benefits from this information? And ask yourself with this this New York Times story. It's a lot of independent critical thinkers use that term, Q bono, especially when going through our modern news lexicon. But with that New York Times story, Q bono, who benefits from that psychological, emotional damage that was kind of sent out there to the general public? Who benefits from the story being perpetrated that these ravaged savages beat someone over the head and bashed their head in until their skull exploded with a fire extinguisher?
Well,
who benefits off of that?
The cabal.
Yeah.
No. I don't know who the cabal is, but Time Magazine said that there was a cabal, their words, not mine, of wealthy elites who were conspiring. Again, Time Magazine said that, not me.
To fortify the election?
Well, to ensure the proper outcome.
Of course.
Right.
Yes.
And so who benefits? Well, the people who are trying to impeach Donald Trump. I would normally just say the Democrats, but apparently Time Magazine says there's a cabal. So I guess it's canon now. For a long time, people have referred to the cabal in a sort of conspiratorial way. And people have been like, oh, come on, there's no cabal. Well, Time Magazine, an official certified NewsGuard source. You can put it in Wikipedia now, the cabal, and then put a little citation to the Time Magazine article. It exists. I'm half kidding, by the way. But the bigger point is, the next story we have is coming off of the impeachment from this weekend. The Democrats definitely benefited from fake news, but they also benefited from the fake news they created with the evidence that they doctored. So I don't know if you guys saw this, Will, Jordan, the tweets and the selective video. So I think everybody noticed the videos were off. They cut what Trump said. They added audio like after or in between. But more importantly, they actually showed a tweet that they totally just made. My favorite, I don't know if it was a screw up or not, was when a woman tweeted, "We're bringing the cavalry." And then was it Eric Swalwell she said she's bringing the cavalry.
That's not right.
Do you guys know what the cavalry is?
It's like a religious thing. I don't know exactly.
It's a I could be wrong,
So
but
that is a reference to the hill that Jesus died on. It's a very strong religious reference, and I completely understand what she's saying there. She's like trying to bring religion into it and make it be like almost like a crusade, which also I don't really like, but I kind of understand that better.
it is an open air representation of the crucifixion of Jesus. And they did bring the cross and raised it on the Capitol.
There you go.
They were bringing the cavalry. And he said cavalry as if to imply they were going to be storming the gates on horseback. They clearly didn't know what they were talking about.
Well, there's more than that. There was they changed the date on a tweet, right? That might seem small, but that's
the year,
well,
right?
but that wasn't in the actual trial. That was in the New York Times. But this is where the media comes in to lie to everyone once again. Check this story out from Business Insider. They say Trump lawyer accuses House managers of manipulating evidence by pointing to doctored tweets that weren't used in the impeachment trial. Did you hear that? Weren't used in the impeachment trial?
Was it in the briefing?
It was used in the impeachment trial. What happened was Swalwell he recreated tweets. Why? Well, Donald Trump's account has been banned. In his recreation, an image that was shown in the New York Times had the wrong date, January 3rd, 2020. When they presented that same doctored tweet, it was actually 2 tweets in one graphic image. They corrected it to 2021. To say that they didn't use that simply because they altered it slightly to a certain degree is absolutely insane. Because what Trump's lawyers were saying was they added the verification badge to make it seem like Trump was quoting a public figure, probably of some prominence, telling people to show up in D.C. and to bring the cavalry. Which, the funny thing was, when he was saying that, the actual image said Calvary. Like they didn't know what it was. And I remember when this happened in the trial, I saw an actual lefty journalist say cavalry or Calvary. Does this guy not know the difference? And this was like a lefty journalist. He didn't. You know what, man? Maybe the only reason this guy got in is because Fang Fang was propping him up.
Fang.
He's still on the House Intelligence Committee for reasons.
Yes.
Intelligent.
Go back 30 years, any politician during the Cold War gets caught you slept with a Russian spy.
Yeah. That's it.
That's the end of your career. You are asked to resign by your party.
Your own party,
How can we not be demoralized when you have a guy who was aided in his campaign for office by a Chinese spy? He was sleeping with her, right?
Literally, yeah.
He was sleeping with her?
I believe so, yeah.
Those are the allegations. He won't answer specifically if he did or didn't. So some people are saying guilt by association by not even responding to the specific
I don't agree
question.
with that.
Some people are saying that.
But I'd like proof. But let's just we know he was associated and working with, and she was helping his campaign. That's a fact.
I wouldn't want to see the proof. I mean,
gosh, no.
poor Fang Fang.
Good.
You said poor Fang Fang?
Poor
Really
Fang
took
Fang.
one for
Chinese
the team
spy?
there.
She had to, be with Mr. Swalwell.
That's a good point.
Yuck.
There was
That's a good
a
point.
Babylon Bee article.
He's the guy who farted on
saying-
TV, remember?
Yes, there.
An
Yeah,
election.
I mean, the man also parroted a lot of the communist Chinese government talking points throughout his career.
Shocking.
Fang Fang was very instrumental in raising a lot of funds for his election, and the Babylon Bee article said something like. Chinese spy sent to internment camp because she was forced to sleep with Eric Swalwell, chose internment camp specifically to avoid
remember that.
sleeping
right.
with
I remember
Swalwell.
You know,
so
That's
again,
rude.
satirical article, but again,
That's
major
dedication.
story should have been covered more. There should be more attention to this. There should have been at least more hearings about what actually was released, especially with him being on the
Right.
intelligence committee hearings.
But-
Like what information does China have from Eric?
Here's the point I wanted to make. Here's a guy who definitely needs to be investigated because of his association with a Chinese spy, and he's leading impeachment, presenting doctored evidence.
Yeah.
And look, there's almost no point in having the argument over the veracity or the severity of the doctored evidence. You know that the left goes, "Oh, it was just a verification badge; it's meaningless," and I'm like, I literally don't care. They created that image.
Try that in a federal court.
Yeah, you'll get.
Right.
They'll throw you out. They'll be like, "What do you? How dare you
Judge will
manufacture?"
sanction you, and you will face discipline at the bar, right? If you doctor any sort of evidence.
In any way.
Yeah.
It's not just doctored. He manufactured the image. It was edited together, and the argument is, but it's because Trump's account was deleted. It doesn't matter. You can go into the archives, and the woman's tweets still exist. Instead, he just manipulated an image. That to me is mind blowing. It shows you that this was a completely unserious trial, and then we all knew it was going to happen. Trump is acquitted.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, man. It is entirely demoralizing. What do we do? You know, I've talked about culture, winning the culture war. I understand. Making movies, you know, Ben Shapiro is doing movies. We have now Gina Carano is going to be doing some with the Daily Wire. How do we deal with this?
I mean, you know, I've been thinking about this myself because, you know, I've been mostly over the last couple of years, I've been doing like opinion and commentary, and it's been, you know, it was aimed kind of towards influencing Republicans, right? Like not only, I mean, you know, defending Trump from various things that I think he was unfairly attacked, but also trying to change the Republican perspective
Right.
on things like social media, big tech, free markets, et cetera. Now it's like we're confronted with this banally awful administration with its conjoined banally awful institutions like the New York Times. Like we need to report on them. They need there needs to be like really good. I mean, I think you start with media because culture is politics is downstream of culture, but we also just need really good reporting on them.
We need real journalism and real fearless journalism that's willing to challenge these major institutions. And it seems like, off the top of my head, there's only one name I can think of, and it's Veritas.
They just got banned from Twitter.
I know, right? So they throw every smear in the book at James O'Keefe, and to me, it's crazy. I certainly think James has a point of view. I certainly think he's right leaning or conservative. I mean, he speaks at like CPAC and stuff like that, right? But it doesn't matter to me. I don't care what your politics are. Is what you're telling me true and important? And whenever I look at, say, Veritas's reporting, I take into consideration all framing. And the issue is, James doesn't make opinion commentary like the New York Times does. He just publishes a video and says, here's what they said. Now, maybe you can accuse him of taking things out of context, but why should that faze me when they do it all day, every day? At the very least, their argument is James is as bad as they are, or the same as they are. There's good reporting from the Times, and I try my best to find it, and sometimes they do things like this. They do it all too often. So what?
Well, you can't trust a news outlet that's that afraid of their readers. I mean, the New York Times is terrified of their subscribers. So, like, why are we trusting anything that they're saying?
That's a good point.
You're just telling these people what they want to hear because you're so afraid. And then this goes back to the culture war, too. Like, why are we losing the culture war? We're terrified of pissing people off. Like, we just need to stop being afraid of pissing everybody off.
It's the craziest thing to me. Like, since when are conservatives worried about offending Hollywood? Like, you're never going to be in those movies, dude. They hate your guts.
They hate you. They're going to hate you no matter what you say.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
That's a really good point. There was something I saw for about Fox News where I think it was it Lachlan Murdoch? Is that his name?
Yeah. That's
he said something like, we're going to be a center-right organization because the right way a news organization serves its audience is to like present them information that they want to hear or whatever, or they agree with, something like that. I don't know exactly what he said, but that's exactly it. We've gone from news organizations say things I don't like, but that's the news. It used to be that people trusted the news outlet, and if they heard news they didn't like, they didn't blame the news outlet for saying it. Now they do.
Yeah. I don't think all hope is lost. I think there's a reason a lot of these media companies had to turn off their comments. I think there's a reason why apps like Telegram and Signal are doing as well as they are. And just looking at the latest comments from the 60 Minutes Bill Gates interview, there's a lot of interesting comments, to say the least. And I just looked up Eric Swalwell on Twitter, and one of the first thing that comes up is a Happy Valentine's Day card with him and Fang Fang on it. So the culture there, the resistance, the people informing themselves and understanding what's going on. I think that there's more of that than we realize. On the perception of people being dumb and angry and stupid is something that is programmed in the algorithm to make us believe that's true, but I believe it's more rare than it is visible on social media.
No, I mean, I'd like to push back slightly, I guess. I think about, I was the person who said Trump was not going to win back at the end of November and got like the tweet that was ratioed into oblivion.
20,000
replies.
Amazing.
All the Trump supporters being like, you turncoat.
And I was right. And I mean, like, they were all wrong.
And rub it in, Will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I can't brag here,
it's like that meme. You're like, why are you booing? I'm right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, but the point being that there was a very, very strange political and like dynamic among people, if you were involved in conservative politics at all, where you were walking on a tightrope in the period after the election, pre-inauguration, where if you even tried to do objective analysis that was even somewhat pessimistic, you were getting like hammered for it.
I get it. A lot of these people who are supporting Trump were desperate and holding on by threads, and so they needed all the morale they could get.
Yeah.
And if a realist steps in and says, guys, it's threads, man. They're like, no, like, they can't let go.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, I kept saying this, it wasn't just Trump trying to win by the numbers. It was Trump versus the machine.
Yeah.
It was an issue of, can Trump win the votes is one thing. Can Trump beat the machine through the legal process, with lawyers, with public opinion, with the entire establishment against him? That was a bigger question.
Yeah.
And in the end, the answer was no.
Yep.
However, I do think it's hilarious that even after they beat him in the election, they had to give themselves one final L Like, they couldn't just walk away. They were like, let's try an impeachment we know won't work. Just to be losers on the way out. Give Trump the final word.
They could have let it go. They really didn't have to do
Well,
it.
they're not. They're not going to let it go. Eric Swallow is calling for more investigations and more hearings. He was just talking about how God is a woman during during some of his testimony that he was on right now. And now Nancy Pelosi is calling for a 9/11 style commission into the January 6th insurgency. So they're not going to stop talking about this at all, because this is the only card that they have. A lot of Americans are asking them, like, hey, you promised us a lot of stuff. Show us what you got. You're in power. You have the House. You have the Senate. You have the presidency. What can you do for the American people? And they're like, 9/11 commission on Donald Trump? Do you want that? And people are like, no, I don't want that. That doesn't interest me. What can you do for me? And the American people are asking that, and it's going to become more tumultuous as we move forward.
This is what I love about what the Democrats are doing right now. There's a lot of pundits on the left that they love projecting what's going on with Democrats onto Republicans. And it's funny because the Republicans don't do anything. You know what I mean? Like Mitch McConnell is, what does he vote? Not guilty, but then complains Trump was guilty. It's like, clearly the dude's not doing anything. Republican leadership at this point is an oxymoron. But the Democrats like to claim the Republicans don't have any real policies. That's why they're not doing anything. The Democrats have no real policies. That's why all they keep doing is saying orange man bad. Well, after the orange man's gone, it's been a month. Seriously. And now they want to do a new commission. 9/11 style commission to investigate the Capitol breach is the next step. Oh, is it? But why? Impeachment's over. What's the point?
Yeah, the National Guard's still in D.C., right? I mean, I was there briefly, and I still saw they had all the fences and the barbed wire. It was the day of freezing rain. It looked absolutely miserable. I think that was the day that the verdict was announced. They're still there. They've still militarized the Capitol.
They're going to be there until March.
Yeah.
Like for what?
I heard they're going to be there longer, actually. So I can't remember who exactly tweeted this joke, but they said something about the National Guard they're now saying the National Guard will remain in D.C. until the fall. The fall of what?
I'd be so pissed if I was in the National Guard and they're like, you just need to stand out here by this barbed wire fence and sleep in the parking garage on the street.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
And share a bathroom, one bathroom with 5,000 other individuals.
One bathroom.
You know,
It's
one outlet.
They're still doing it.
Well,
so I don't know if exactly right now, but I remember the big controversy was they were making like 5,000 guardsmen take breaks or like sleep in a parking garage with one power outlet and 2 toilets. And then there was a big uproar. Oh, how dare they? And then like a week ago, they were like, yeah, they're still there. Like they never got them out. The news cycle just walked away and everyone forgot about these people. But I've heard from people who friends of friends of people in the Guard who say that they're extremely demoralized. It's But I mean, think about that. Demoralization has to be sweeping across this country, just across the board. And the issue with that is, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Yuri Bezmenov. He talked about, you know that
sort of
KGB
yeah.
agent.
I feel like I've seen that clip on YouTube.
It's sent 50 billion times to us all day, every day. But he talks about demoralization and what happens when people are completely demoralized and they feel like the system doesn't work anymore. There's no justice. Nancy Pelosi doing this commission is probably the stupidest and most deranged thing I've ever heard. To tell the American people at a time when the news report, I think it was Reuters, $1,400 checks will hold you over until July. Like, in what world will that be enough for anybody? But don't worry. I know you're all stressed. You can't pay your rent. The moratorium on evictions is going to be ending soon. We're going to see millions of evictions, but it's okay. Nancy Pelosi has promised a 9/11 style commission on several hundred people who stormed their way into the Capitol building. And while you're sleeping outside, you can rest easy knowing the full details of what happened on January 6th. It won't change anything in your life. It won't change who the president is. It won't give you any food, but it's the right ideology.
Hey there, hey, don't be all negative. At least the pharma industrial complex is going to have more profits with their insulin. You know, it's not all bad. So
why would they have more profits from their insulin?
Because of the rule that Biden overturned. But
you know what? That actually makes sense, because I was going to say they were going to have less profits, because once they evict the people who are diabetic and they can't have a refrigerator because they'll be living outside for their insulin, they'll die. So then how do they make up that loss of profits from the dead people? Jack the price back up. Yeah, Cuomo style.
Yeah, it's not all bad. The military-industrial complex is also going to be happy, as NATO just announced that they're not going to be leaving Afghanistan anytime soon today
great.
as
Yeah,
well.
that's good.
So thank the
Yeah.
Lord. I was really worried. I've long said when I see all these activists complaining about the military-industrial complex and American empire, and I'm like, who's going to bomb the kids if we don't do it? And then when Trump was the Abraham Accords bringing peace to the Middle East, thank our lucky stars.
How gauche of him, you know?
I know,
You're right.
Praise be to Biden, bringing in those drones and keeping us in Afghanistan. For what reason? I'm not entirely sure, but apparently they told us it needs to be done. Most of my life, we've been in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
More than half of my
whole
life.
life,
Yeah.
There's fathers and sons fighting alongside each other
Yeah.
in Afghanistan.
So
it's the
insane.
longest war in American history.
Oh,
and
no.
where does the money go? Where does the money go?
a
Where
toilet.
does all the opium
It is,
come from?
yeah.
The 90% of the world's opium. Where does it come from?
It's a
Again,
money toilet.
Yeah, and the stories that I've heard, because I've heard from a lot of soldiers that were over there, especially when it comes to we can't even talk about some of the stuff here that the soldiers caught, and soldiers were punished in the United States for exposing the abuse of children in Afghanistan and trying to stop it in Afghanistan. So it's just an absolutely horrible thing to be in there.
I understand you're hurting, and if this kind of stuff stresses you out, makes you angry. But did you know that Nancy Pelosi is putting together a 9/11 style commission on the people who stormed the Capitol?
Feels good, man.
See, he's laughing. He's laughing.
right.
Good.
Yeah.
It's the same type of. We were just talking about the New York Times and their own navel gazing being constantly consumed by their own internal HR drama.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Congress is now constantly internally consumed by its own. Think about they spent their time trying to expel Marjorie Taylor Greene, impeaching the president, 9/11 commissions. It's all
Drama. It's all reality
it's,
TV.
It's just all internal HR matters,
Dude,
basically within the government, as opposed to doing things. They've stopped being able to perform their function.
I almost want to run for office. And when people are like, what do you stand for? I just be like, I'm going to just build a shed for this one guy. Just that's it. Huh. I'm gonna use all of my time to go just to local people's houses and help them with their chores. If you elect me, I will help you with your chores. Because at least then your taxpayer dollars goes towards something productive. Because I can't tell you what these people are doing.
Right.
I might not be there to vote on whatever stupid garbage bill they're proposing, but I assure you this: if I ever did run, I'd literally just weed your garden, put up some fences for you, walk your dog, because then your tax dollars are at least getting you some public service, right?
I mean, how hard is it? This is the easiest government program ever. Just give people money.
Yeah.
They did it already. They know how to do it. They just write a check. They use whatever technology they did to put the money in your bank account.
Well, they even fumbled that, especially with even the first check.
Oh, yeah,
there was
dead people.
multiple trials. There was different layers. There was different time periods when people got their checks. So the government can't even send you a check correctly. What makes you think they should run your medical health care?
Right.
What makes you think that they should be in charge of anything in your life?
They were giving dead people money, and they were giving money to non-citizens overseas.
Yeah.
How does it happen that some dude in a different country wakes up the American government gave me money for some
Very
reason?
We have a
Cool.
social security number, all of us. It's so easy. They have the data. All they have to do is literally be like, okay, yeah, send them a check. Oh, live, dead check. That's it. They can't even do. They can't run
I'll
the
tell you
DMV. They can't run the post office. And guess what? All of government runs that way.
Preach.
Spend a few days, spend a few hours even at your local DMV, and imagine these central controllers wanting to control every aspect of your life. It would scare the bejesus out of you.
That's the one thing I don't get. The people who advocate for universal health care like Bernie Sanders does, do they not remember going to the DMV once?
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of problems that lead to government incompetence. And it gets back to the point I was making earlier. There's not a good way to punish them for lying. I think perhaps, there's two big disciplines on our public companies that in our regulatory system kind of works for this, right? The first discipline is they have to make money. And the second is they have to tell the truth every 3 quarters, or they risk they don't always do it, but they're under a legal obligation to, and they have to file a report that's examined by, stock market investors.
I want public lashings.
Yes.
You're a politician, you lie, you have to go to the center of the city, and you get lashed by a random citizen who wins the lottery.
A constituent
Yeah.
is given the cat of 9 tails.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you get to whoop the politicians
But
in the buttocks for lying.
Yeah.
I'll clarify, though, because I
They
said...
do that in Somalia, by the way.
I said the people like Bernie Sanders because I actually would I personally would like some kind of universal basic health care. But Bernie Sanders wants to abolish private health care. I think so long as you have that competition and you have that choice, I think we'll be okay. Mm-hmm. But I also think before you can implement any kind of major social reform, you've got to weed out the corruption. And I think that's the biggest wall blocking legitimate social programs and social reform.
I mean, if you can't even give people $2,000 checks, how on earth are you going to do brain surgery on them? Government's not competent enough to do this. And
That's the problem is, like when the programs first start, when the government first comes in, there's somebody with a decent idea that makes sense to a lot of people. But businesses have to fight to survive. They have to make sense. A business has to be able to generate revenue and profit to hire more people and grow. And if they can't, they collapse. Government, when they just can't do it, they just send more people with guns to collect more taxes and then pump more money into something that's not working.
Yeah.
So that's always been my thing. I like the idea of social programs. The problem is, well, the first question is, can they ever be implemented properly? Or is the issue, there needs to be an expiration date on all of them, period.
I mean, you have to think about how you use government and trying to like keep whatever it's doing within its core competency. Like when I think about, for example, what should big tech law look like? I'm advocating a bigger governmental role in regulating Twitter and Facebook, et cetera. Well, I'm like, okay, so we want civil rights style litigation that allows people to go to court and pursue their rights, like essentially sue the companies, because we have courts, they work, they know how to issue orders and get people to comply with them. Like that's a core competency of government. When you're saying, oh, government should literally run the healthcare system, you're way outside the government's core competency.
Well, we talked a bit about how giving out checks to people, the government's inability to do things. Well, we got another big story that I think plays into the government's ability to do things. And actually, what you guys are saying makes me a little bit more confident, because we have this story. CBS News reports Biden calls on Congress to ban assault weapons and institute other gun restrictions. I suppose the good news there is that, as we just mentioned, they can't get giving out money right. They can't even give people money. Are they going to be able to actually implement?
Be able to do that?
Yeah, how are they going to actually be able to take anybody's guns away or do anything like that? They seem to have no idea what they're doing.
I mean, the thing is, it won't, and it will create more conflict, and it will create more fights, and it will create a really nasty situation inside of the United States. And it seems like some people within our government are hell-bent at fighting each other. And I think this is exactly what this particular bigger grab of authority away from the people is. You're pretty much saying that you're not saying that guns are bad. You're just saying that only the special privileged people should have guns. The politicians should have guns. And I don't know why we're not making this more of a talking point, but gun control, specifically in the United States, is based off institutional racism and white supremacy. There's a long history of that.
But hold on.
And you would think
that's not even like some haha got you talking point.
No. Not.
This is actually something the left does say all the time, because people need to understand leftists and liberals are not the same thing. It's the liberal corporate Democrat types, establishment types that are like, ban all the guns. Leftists, like Antifa, they're like, nah, we like our guns. They're pro 2A. They're tools of the revolution. They love that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm a little more optimistic on the front of what's going to happen, because I think the courts are going to shut that down. Much of the early assault weapons ban stuff, that predates DC versus Heller and the big cases that the Supreme Court ruled on, which basically protects the individual right to guns that are in common use. And I think there might be no more gun that's more in common use than the AR-15. It's the most commonly purchased rifle platform.
First, let me just say, the gist of the story is Biden put out this campaign statement saying we need to ban assault weapons, universal background checks. So what you need to understand about assault weapons is there's no definition.
Yeah.
Assault weapon is meaningless. Assault rifle typically refers to selective fire rifles, so they can do single burst and full auto. Those have been illegal even before they were invented because of I guess, like, was it NFA? Was that it? I don't know. I'm not the most gun person ever. I can already see all the chat lighting up with people saying Tim has no idea what he's talking
right.
about.
I'm gonna correct you.
The point is, assault rifles are not legal. They can do full auto. Assault weapon has no unifying definition, and it makes literally no sense. In some states, there's like a standard. There's like in some states, for instance, the M1 is illegal, and like for what reason is that illegal? And then your standard SCAR or whatever is legal.
So cosmetic differences.
But I mean,
something on assault weapon versus not, totally not related to function.
It's like, well, that weapon was once used in war, so it's illegal. But the other one that's more modern, more powerful, and more efficient is totally fine. It's meaningless. So I suppose the bigger picture is whether or not the government will be able to do it. And you mentioned you're a bit more optimistic on the court shutting this down. Mm-hmm. But my question is, it's the Second Amendment. What is it? Do you know the text of the Second Amendment, Will?
The rights. I'm trying not off the top of my.
You don't need
head,
to give it verbatim.
but yeah,
right.
like something because like a well-armed or well-regulated militia being necessary to the health of a free society, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
What's that last part?
It shall not be infringed.
Before that,
The right to keep and bear arms.
those two words, what were they? Keep
And bear.
Bear.
Bear means, and that's part of the Heller decision, right? Like the ability to.
So
or I think a later one.
So why is it
publicly.
that in D.C., for instance, I can't legally bear arms?
Because courts, I mean, the way these amendments are interpreted, they're, judicial interpretation, judicial gloss changes things. I mean, so.
Manipulation and power.
I mean,
the politicians in D.C. are like, I'll be damned if I'm going to let anyone challenge me.
Pre-Heller, I mean, before Heller was ruled, the Ninth Circuit had already decided that the ability to keep a handgun in your home was not part of the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Right. It took Heller to reverse that and be like, no, there's an individual right to bear arms in your home.
And and you know why that's absolutely insane?
Yeah.
The initial language of the Second Amendment before it was called the Second Amendment, it was called like Article 5 or something. I can't remember which article it was. There were 17 articles proposed for the Constitution, and the first two had to do with like Congress and apportionments or something like that. But the original text literally said, basically, even if somebody doesn't want to be in a militia, they're allowed to have a gun. And they took that out. I guess I was reading they were worried it would outlaw conscription. And considering it was, the birth of a new nation, they're like, nah, we need to be able to force people to fight wars for us. And look, I'm not trying to be a dick. Like back then we had the War of 1812, we had the British kidnapping people.
Well, we were weak. I mean, people forget how weak we
Yeah,
were.
we were
Like
young.
Britain won the War of 1812 and then made a nice peace with us because they were more worried about Napoleon.
But what I love, I was reading, I was reading about it, how it's one of the few wars where everyone declared victory, and the only loser was the Native Americans who were caught in the crossfire.
I mean, Madison sent our troops up into like Canada, and then
Right.
Britain showed up
Montreal.
and was like, "Oh, look, you left your capital unoccupied. I guess we'll burn it to the ground."
Yeah, I remember that.
And
Yep.
I mean, we were losing badly because they were a massive naval power. We were very, very weak. And again,
Right.
the only reason they just got annoyed by it. They're like, okay, Napoleon's conquering all of Europe right now. That's a little more important than what those colonies are doing.
Yeah,
So
we almost took Montreal. The U.S. tried to take Montreal, and
Darn.
so it's entirely possible that would have been in America. But so the initial proposal for the Second Amendment actually was longer, and it basically said, in the event even somebody does not want to join a militia, they can still have that weapon. They took it out, and then that leaves us today, where you have these people who are arguing like it says a well-regulated militia. First of all, which definition of regulated are they saying? Regulated in the term in the sense of armed and efficient, like well-regulated in the sense that everyone's got a weapon, or regulated in the sense that the government controls what they do. It's a modern interpretation off of what they may have actually
It's also
meant.
just bad grammar, right? Like the first, people should know how to read an English sentence. The first phrase, a prefatory phrase, is like, here is one reason why we're going to enact this rule, right? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the health of a free state. It's like, that's one reason
Right.
reason that we're going to do this. And then we say the rule, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
So that's the big issue. Joe Biden says he wants to do this. We got the story here from Michigan Live, how riots, politics, and a pandemic drove record gun sales in Michigan from February 13th. But this is just one story I just pulled up. I mean, we've had record sales, record background checks for the past year because of the riots, the pandemic, and politics. So now we're hearing from Joe Biden he wants to start banning assault weapons. But by their definition, that's like this is the craziest thing. One weapon you can buy in, say, New York, you can't even bring to New Jersey. You could live in Philadelphia, literally on the water. You cross over to the other side with a totally legal weapon. Now it's an assault weapon. Definition changes outright. So the first thing I suppose they'd have to do is define what an assault weapon was. And I'll tell you the scary thing is there was an attempt several years ago to define any semi-automatic weapon as an assault weapon, which meant literally the handgun a cop uses. So I went down to March for Our Lives, the big protest. This was, I think, in 2017 or 18. And I was asking people, and I wasn't trying to do this gotcha stuff that you'll often see on YouTube where they're like, you're so dumb, explain it, like Jimmy Kimmel does or whatever. I saw people holding signs saying ban assault rifles. And so I would ask them, like, are you aware that they're already banned? And then they would go, oh, and they would like pull their sign down and fold it up and then hide it. Like, I guess you didn't realize. I wasn't trying to get you. And then I would ask some people, very simply, I had the bill pulled up that was proposed that would make like a Glock 17 illegal as an assault weapon. It would literally define the handgun as an assault weapon, one of the most common weapons in the country. And so I would ask people, do you think assault weapons should be banned? Yes. do you think that includes, say, semi-automatic handguns? And they'll go, no, of course not. What about like, a Glock 17 or something like a cop would use, or a Glock 19? And they would be like, no. We just mean high-powered rifles where you can get off like 30 rounds in a few minutes. And then I would show them the bill, from like GovTrack, and I'd be like, here's the current bill. Do you agree with what the Democrats are proposing? And they would go, oh, no, I absolutely do not agree with that. And I'd be like, I mean, maybe it's important that, all these millions of people coming out here know that. I mean, you'd come out here, and a lot of people were shocked. They didn't realize just how serious it was, that there have been proposals even to get rid of semi-automatic. You see, I don't know if you guys remember that, what was it, CNN or whatever, where they said fully semi-automatic.
What?
Right. Yeah, like they didn't even know what they're talking about. And so there's a lot of people who think semi-automatic means you hold the trigger down and,
That'd be
full
funny.
auto. It's not. It's remarkable how. So I recently. I guess you're not supposed to say what kind of weapons you have, but look, it's probably fine if I mention this one I just got, right? You think it's okay?
I don't know.
What?
The big one?
No.
Go pew?
Well, no, the hunting one.
Okay.
I'll just say. So I got a bolt action 450 Bushmaster Ruger, and when I was buying it, they were just basically saying to me like, you should have no problems with this bolt action. It's great. It's excellent for hunting. It was designed for deer and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's perfect in the event we do want to go hunting or something like that, and we want to go out with somebody. And then I asked them, I was like, why is it that they regulate the AR-15s, but this thing is like just not even on the books? And they were, well, because they have no idea what they're talking about. And I had several people tell me that less moving parts on the bolt action 450. These are decently large rounds. They're more accurate at longer distances. They're potentially more dangerous from somebody who wants to cause harm. But because these politicians have no idea what they're talking about, they think the scary black-looking rifle is a military weapon. It's got to be banned. Meanwhile, this hunting rifle, which is actually more deadly and more accurate, they're like, oh, that's fine. That's what well, you know what? I think the better way to put it is, I can talk all about this stuff as I'm discovering it and exploring it as I go to the gun shop and I'm buying these things. And a lot of the people who own guns are sitting there laughing and banging like, they're laughing like, young Tim finally learning what it's like. But here's the funny thing about it. It's also a wake-up call to, it's kind of like the Gell-Mann amnesia effect. Mm-hmm. For those that aren't familiar, the idea of the Gell-Mann amnesia effect is when you read a news article about something you're familiar with. So let's say you're a gun owner, and you read a story saying assault weapons will be banned, and then they make reference to things that don't exist, and they get assault weapon wrong, and they define words. You laugh like, these journalists have no idea. They say fully semi-automatic. They're so dumb. You turn the page, and then it's like conflict in Syria, 50 dead. And you go, wow, I didn't know that. The idea is you all of a sudden forgot how incompetent these journalists were. I suppose there's another effect I would liken this to is people believe in government until they realize there's an area of government they're familiar with and how awful it's being controlled and regulated. So as soon as you start getting into like buying guns and going to class, which a lot of people are doing, all of a sudden you go, if they're doing this really bad, what other regulations do we have that are just as bad? If they don't know what an assault weapon is and can't define it, how are they handling medicine?
So this was super funny to me because the lady who sold me my personal weapon of choice in a different state was like, well, the state that you live in does not like this gun because it looks scary. And that kind of struck me as strange because I was like, the people who are actually regulating the things that we can and can't buy, this literal right that we have that's in the Constitution, they have no idea what they're talking about. They know nothing about what they're saying. And they think that they have a right to like tell us what we can and can't do. It's in the Constitution. I'm sorry, you may not like it.
Well, another thing to really consider here is this is a very unpopular move by Biden. People have been buying guns in record numbers, even in big cities. Even a lot of people
Liberals
on the left,
Yeah.
a lot of people on the left have been buying firearms. And I truly believe this is done in an effort to push for more chaos. Order out of chaos is usually the big kind of agenda that you see from a lot of these politicians that try to stir up a whole bunch of problems and then come in with the larger solution. At all costs, we need to prevent violence from happening. And the people in Brazil are having the opposite problem, as I'm learning right now. I'm reading an article that's talking about how Bolsonaro in Brazil is trying to make it easier for citizens to get guns more easily. And the Guardian has a propaganda article about this, and it's titled, "Anger as Bolsonaro Moves to Make Guns Easier to Access, a Threat to Democracy."
Terrifying.
People need to understand, when you're armed with a firearm, This is what politicians are protected by. So if the politicians could have protections, why can't the average citizen be able to protect themselves and their properties? So when it comes to criminals, like in Mexico or let's say Chicago, places where guns are illegal, criminals still magically get guns and firearms.
We got to talk about this story. All right. We got this story from Reason. This gun shop says it won't do business with Biden voters.
Yeah, in Missouri?
No, in Michigan.
Oh.
Tech companies should have the same freedom to choose their customers. So this is a Michigan-based ammunition shop is refusing to sell to any customer who voted for President Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Quote, we've had a few potential customers call this morning to ask why they have to check a box stating they did not vote for Joe Biden in order to purchase our ammunition. Phoenix Ammunition
Yes.
tweeted yesterday morning.
I know them.
The answer? Joe Biden ran on a campaign built on the most radical gun control platform a major party candidate has ever had, including banning the online sale of ammunition. This, says Phoenix, is essentially a plan to bankrupt our company. That's true. I couldn't believe it when I read that. Joe Biden said, we will ban the online sale of ammo. Why? Like, what's seriously the problem there?
Yep.
That's crazy.
Their whole plan is like, we're going to throw as much sand in the gears of gun ownership as we can.
For what reason?
But also, you have to look at strategically here. This is against the best interest of the United States national security. One of the things that makes America strong is its armed citizenry. When you take away the arms, geopolitically, we become weaker on the world stage.
Well, I mean, like, since when has like what's good for the American people stopped Democrat ideology
mean,
from working?
Well,
Like,
political
I mean,
ideology.
like-
I would say political ideology.
Well, and I want to be fair, too. Republican gets excluded from that because Republicans mostly do nothing.
yeah,
right,
What
you
did
know.
Trump do for the Second Amendment?
I mean,
Nothing.
Well, no, he did worse. He did
Yeah,
bad for
yeah.
it. Banning bump
I mean,
stocks.
really the big proposition, the value proposition of Republican governance is that they won't do more bad things. Not
Right.
that they'll do good things to improve your life, but that they'll just
They'll-
avoid doing the bad things.
But when it comes to
Or
Trump
less
and
bad
the
things.
and the bump stock ban, he went further than Democrats would have even wished. Democrats usually grandfather in people and their firearms and their accessories. Donald Trump made Americans felons overnight with the signing of a pen, something that, of course, Democrats weren't able to do. Trump did.
I want to read more of this. So there's another quote. They say, in a series of follow-up tweets, the company stressed that it was perfectly willing to give up potential sales to people who voted for Biden. We're dead serious, Phoenix Ammunition tweeted. We don't want your money, and you shouldn't want us to have it because we're going to use it to make more ammo, sell it to the citizenry, and do everything in our power to prevent Joe Biden's administration from usurping the rights of Americans. We have no problem talking to Biden voters and educating them on what they did, but they have to be willing to acknowledge their ignorance at the very least. We are not going to sit here and debate with you. We're a 2A company, and these are our first principles. Phoenix Ammunition's announcement has provoked a wave of positive attention from the right. Many are applauding the company for sticking up for its beliefs and declining to do business with people it sees as a threat to its business model. I love this. Quote, private company, tweeted perennial MAGA gadfly Jack Posobiec. The implication being that because Phoenix is private, it can do it at once. He's right, of course. Phoenix is perfectly within its rights to reject customers who voted for Biden or for any other reason related to a person's politics. Not in D.C., by the way. In D.C., political ideology is a human right. And then they go on to say, I love this. And so is Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and Reddit and so on. Yet when it comes to these private companies rejecting customers based on their ideological beliefs and political statements, Posobiec and many, many others on the right have been whining and objecting nonstop. They insist it violates their rights somehow. They champion proposals to force these private actors to carry speech they disagree with and cater to customer bases they find objectionable. They support federal action to punish private businesses for not being politically neutral. So which is it?
Who
When
wrote this and why are they simping?
Is it
for
Robbie? No, it's
arts?
Elizabeth Nolan Brown. It's Reason.
Okay,
Come on.
it's
It's
Reason.
Reason. Yeah.
Right.
Libertarians.
Yeah.
So they're
Like, they don't get that it's like Jack's joking, right? I mean,
Right,
if
right.
if you actually go to Jack and you say, here's the deal. We can regulate private companies and prevent them from discriminating against you politically on Facebook and Twitter. But here's what you have to give up. The random gun shop in Michigan also has to serve Biden voters. He'd be like, yeah, I'll take the regulation.
Right,
please.
right,
Thank
right.
you. You know,
He's clearly joking, saying private company is poking fun at all of the people. This is really funny where libertarians break from a lot of conservatives and, on one of these issues, and they're more aligned with liberals on this one. Actually, let me just say, somehow that happened. When did pro-corporate libertarians, I shouldn't say pro-corporate, but pro-private right for companies break from conservatives on that issue and join the liberals?
Well, it's more like
The liberals were always for the regulations.
the liberals realized both the liberals and conservatives actually hold political power at times. Libertarians don't.
Yep.
So that's kind of where you start. And so liberals realized that it assisted them in their attempts to hold and wield political power if they were going to indulge the right of corporations to censor their ideological adversaries. And so liberals who in any other context would never talk about how private companies can do whatever they want are suddenly saying, oh, actually, Facebook and Twitter are uniquely in the position where they should be given full autonomy. Whereas conservatives are, like me, are also, generally being like, no, generally the free market's a good idea, but I'm sorry, I don't like being discriminated against.
Right. That's the difference between absolute, like, bottom of the spectrum libertarianism of, free for all essentially, and, well, we need some government, we need some regulations.
Well, I'd love to hear a libertarian explain why, if, given this position that they have of like, oh, you should never interfere with a private company's right to do what they want, whether or not they could oppose the 1964 Civil Rights Act and support the repeal of that law.
They do support the repeal of it.
Some do, but like
Right.
Many don't, and many certainly aren't willing to talk about it. I mean, I actually did a debate.
Like Joe Jorgensen.
Yeah, I did a debate with Robbie Suave on this, and he just dissembled horribly on it. I love Robbie, but like he had a rough time when he was talking about the right of Facebook and Twitter to censor people. I'm like, okay, it's like, do you oppose the 1964 Civil Rights Act? He's like, well, yeah, I do. And I'm like, okay, so you're for hotels and restaurants being able to discriminate against black people. He's like, well, it's just.
This is the craziest thing to me because I've never moved on this position. Like, I've always been in this, like, this was the center left. Pro-regulation when corporations were interfering with the rights of individuals becoming too powerful. That's when the people band together and say, you have too much power and it's causing us harm.
So, interestingly, like, this is where, the libertarians were educated. Like, I feel like I was educated in this way that was saying, like, actually, really the problem was government and, all those civil rights, they would have been protected. And the issue was government intervention, and Goldwater was right. The Civil Rights Act went too far. And then, I look back at that, 10 or 12 years ago, Will, and I'm like, that was dumb. Why did I believe that? That was clearly like historically wrong and just very, very ideological.
Well, do you know the story behind how, like, this is one of the stories of how we saw the end of segregation was, I think it was Lyndon Johnson. He had some black men who worked for him, and he asked them
I told you the story.
You told me the story. There you go. Oh, did you write this up for Human Events?
Yeah, I wrote this up.
Tell the story, man, because it's a brilliant story.
So, I mean, this is in Robert Caro's biography, right? But so Lyndon Johnson had these, had black employees, and a couple of them he had drive his car all the way back to Texas from D.C. every year. And there usually wasn't a big deal, but one year he wanted them to take his dog back with him, and they were like, please don't make us do that. And Lyndon's like, why? Like, what's the big deal? You have a dog in the car. Who cares? And he's like, do you understand what it's like to drive through the Jim Crow South with a car? Like, we have to drive, 40 miles off the main drag just to find a hotel or a restaurant.
Jeez.
Like, and many times we just have to sleep in the car. And we have to do that now with a dog too. Are you kidding? And it was sort of that moment that was just crystallized. Like, wait, we don't have to let that happen. Like, we could, whatever's going on in the South, we don't have to tolerate people not being able to go to a motel or a restaurant on the road and having to go. We just don't have to tolerate that. We can say that that's illegal now. And to me, that's just really powerful of, you can come up with all these, rationalizations and hypotheticals about what would have happened in the absence of some early horrible government intervention, and every bad thing is the fruit of that early government intervention, like libertarians try to argue.
I hear a lot from libertarians that, eventually these businesses would have failed and their competition would have succeeded. I think the key word is eventually. Like, how long would that take?
Maybe.
And I think maybe is the right word.
But here's another point. Like, put yourself in the position of a restaurateur or a motel owner in the Jim Crow South, just on some random, stretch of highway. Are you making money hand over fist in the 1960s? No, you're not, right? You're a restaurateur in the Jim Crow South in the 1960s. So in the abstract, like, if some black person came in, even if you had, like, maybe were someone inclined to racism, you might say, like, well, we need the money, so we're perfectly happy to serve you. But the problem was there was this private, like, the problem was, like, this widespread racist disgust among the customer base. And so, if there were so many white customers who were racist and would not stay in a motel that was integrated. And so that private consumer demand for discrimination was sustaining the racism, and there was no, that would have continued. The libertarians are wrong. That would have just continued on.
Right.
And I think about how this private discrimination is being used now. I mean, it's, again, not the same quality, much worse to be racist, but we see how progressives act today, how they try and use collective pressure to exclude conservatives from public life. Like, well, how does the market solve that?
A really good example that there is a problem of ideology is Gina Carano posts a tweet, Disney fires her, Lucasfilm fires her. So when an individual employee, her as the star of the show The Mandalorian, says something political, the company says, oh, we can't allow that. That's offensive. You're fired. You then have the story of this restaurant where one employee wanted to wear a Black Lives Matter mask. And the business said basically the same thing Disney did. You can't have that. You can't wear it. Sorry. So the activists got the business shut down. It doesn't matter if you're the employer or the employee. When you oppose the cult, they come after you.
That's what I think is funny about this gun shop story is that you have one gun shop who's saying we don't want to do business with Biden voters. Well, how many businesses have turned around and said we don't want to do any business with Trump supporters? Like,
exactly.
Maybe not huge corporations aren't publicly saying that, but I've seen small businesses on Instagram and Facebook posting and saying, if you're a Trump supporter, we don't want your money.
That's the funny. There was remember that video where the vape shop guy is screaming at the top of his lungs because the guy's wearing a MAGA hat? Mm-hmm. Like, dude, it's one thing when Phoenix Ammunition is like, hello there, good sir, a Biden voter. I'm sorry, take your business elsewhere. It's another thing when a guy walks in with a MAGA hat and the vape store guy goes, screaming as loud as he can.
It's so mundane. That's where discrimination against conservatives is so mundane that we don't even talk about it. It's not even news.
Right.
It's news when a conservative business discriminates against liberals, not the reverse.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it was meme worthy when the guy was screaming, "Get him back there!" And the guy's like, "I'm wearing a hat, bro. What's wrong with you?"
So does this prove that the government intervention didn't work? In our current modern day circumstances?
Well, no, I mean, there's no government prohibition on political discrimination, right? But there is a government prohibition on racial discrimination. And I think, honestly, when you're looking for things like government policies that worked, that ultimately achieved their objective, I think the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you can fairly say achieved its objective. I think it accelerated, it massively accelerated integration in the Jim Crow South and radically transformed.
But do you
the
think we're regressing, especially with some? I forgot what this picture was from, but there was a mandatory meeting. People of color had to go in one place. White people had to go. Yeah, it was in Seattle.
Seattle
I
Library,
saw this. Do you think we're regressing back into that?
Sure, I think we are. But I think that particular type of discrimination is definitely vulnerable to lawsuits. I think, and Chris Rufo, I don't know if you've had him on yet.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Chris Rufo is awesome, and I think whenever the left tries to go so far and actually wants to do racial discrimination on its own, it's vulnerable to having the Civil Rights Act brought in to wield against it. The political discrimination problem, on the other hand, like we don't currently have the law. We kind of need, except in maybe a few jurisdictions, I think California and D.C. have some political discrimination protections. But in general, I think like that's got to be a project of the right to say, look, the free market is not going to save us. And I think
it's
bro,
it's not a free market.
The Republicans are not going to do that. Mitch McConnell, his professional, I give him a catchphrase: "Slow down, there, Democrats." That's it. That's what he does.
I mean, he might not do it, but he's old and he may not be in office too much longer. And I think I'm more optimistic on this front because, 2 years ago I was saying platform access is a civil right, and people were calling me crazy. Like
they're calling
leftist, they're calling me like Megal Malice did that. I actually
called you a commie.
He didn't call me a commie, but he's like, you're coming from leftist background, and I basically I redid his podcast, and it's just everybody's sort of come around to where I was 2 years ago in this radical position.
I had a conversation with a libertarian in Milwaukee at the Mythicist event, and I wasn't there to be at the event. I ended up on a panel because someone wasn't able to make it, but I was in the green room, and there was a bunch of people sitting around talking to this libertarian. And I said, we need regulation of big tech companies in some capacity, be it the ensuring of the freedom of speech because they've taken the commons, or some kind of regulation that says we need to reform of Section 230. And he said, I don't believe you have a right to tell a private institution what they're allowed to do. And I was like, dude, I've heard the argument. I don't care. If you want to sit back while your ideas are completely erased from the public space, by all means do it, because they ain't my ideas. I'm not a libertarian. I'm actually in favor of regulation, and that's what I'm arguing for. So in 5 years, when your political ideology is gone and doesn't exist, Who's gonna argue for you?
Well,
But also, I think we need to make a distinction between private business and also monopolies that control information highways, and also monopolies specifically that are connected to governments in many different ways. So I think there's a difference between the cake owner versus Twitter, Facebook, YouTube.
Oh yeah,
Google.
no, I randomly get questions from people who say things like, "Well, if you think you should regulate Twitter, how could you possibly oppose regulating the cake owner?"
I don't.
I'm like, from my answer to that is, I mean, I think that's a perfectly consistent position to think you should regulate both.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that it's okay for society to impose larger burdens on billion-dollar companies than on small entrepreneurs.
That's
right. Like it already does that. We do that in insurance. We do that in common carrier. I mean, there's so many different areas of law that treat. Think Obamacare even.
Right.
Small businesses are treated very differently than larger businesses.
So that's one of my first arguments in that when a corporation grows large enough to cause damage to the public, we then come in with regulations. One bakery saying I refuse one thing or another is not causing massive damage to the entirety of the area. However, in my actual position is, look, when it comes to the bakery, what people need to understand, and most people who watch this will probably do, they didn't deny service. They denied a custom message. So the baker basically said you could have any cake that or we can custom make one for you, but we won't write that. And so they sued over it. My position is, I know a lot of people don't like taxes. Libertarians don't like taxes. Taxation is theft. For the time being, if I'm paying taxes to sustain a common area, common infrastructure, pipes, sidewalks, police, fire department, EMS, all of that stuff, and you are using that infrastructure to support your business, that means we are all contributing to the betterment of your business. I believe you have an obligation to reasonably service the public. If someone comes in and is committing crimes, screaming, disruptive, disorderly, threatening, all that stuff, by all means, we kick them out because that's, an affront to everyone in the public. But if we're all contributing to the space to work and live together, and I come into your shop, I understand the argument about the free speech and being forced to write something, and that's a good argument. So I'm kind of on the fence on that one. But overall, I think businesses should provide a equal accommodation to the members of the public.
And I think that's a much closer question than the question of whether or not it's just to regulate Twitter, which I think
Right.
is very one-sided in favor of, yes, it's perfectly just to regulate them. I mean, they're a multi-billion-dollar company that's monopolized a large section of this public square, and that right now people's First Amendment rights aren't really that meaningful. I mean, think about how much Donald Trump has been banned from Twitter for 6 weeks. Think about how much the volume's been turned down on him from losing his Twitter account.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just Twitter. I mean, you can go walk down the street and have a different baker bake a cake, but you could go to Parlor. Not anymore. I mean, I guess now they came back, but before you could go to Parlor, and then Parlor got shut down. And
there's a big difference between private space and government monopolies. That's the thing that we need to really, really, beat into people's heads.
The one of the ways I put it when it comes to social media and why regulation is important is, so like you said, you can go to one baker and he says no. So you walk down the street to another baker. He says yes. There's market competition. You can probably find something. Even if Parlor exists, Twitter is basically the LA Coliseum football stadium. The president is in the middle of the field yelling all of his ideas to the people, and they kick you out, and you can walk a few miles away to a small soccer field at a high school where the local principal is giving his ideas. So do you have meaningful access to the president and politicians who are verified using this platform in mass? That Twitter actually gives will put the position they have as a politician under their name. They recognize politicians aren't using a bunch of these other platforms. So the problem I see is, sure, there may be some competition. There may be Parler, there may be Minds. Trump doesn't use any of them. So are you going to be able to hear the president speak? Imagine if, when television was invented, or radio, if the president was going to give an address, they showed up to your house and said, you can't have the radio on to hear the president. And they came in and turned it off on you. I mean, people
You don't have access to CBS or NBC anymore. You can't watch those networks.
They put a giant metal dome over your house. You can't get any radio waves. We've banned you from collecting this information. It's crazy to me that they restrict you from even hearing. Maybe the answer is to ban people from posting, but not from following. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you can make the argument they already do that because you can always lurk even if you've been banned from Twitter, you can lurk and read
Why
posts.
ban you from subscribing to the president's posts because you said something instead of banning your right to say something?
Well, what they did to Trump is like they kicked him out of the Coliseum and then burned the soccer field down. I mean, he's banned from Spotify.
Yeah.
Like, what is he gonna do? Like,
Why?
listen to too much music? Like, I don't. He's banned from Pinterest. What is he gonna do? Plan a wedding?
Right.
Like, it doesn't make
Don't
any
tell
sense.
me.
I love
Yeah.
when like Twitch banned him.
Yeah,
like, oh no, the
Twitch.
president's gonna play Minecraft and espouses ideology to kids who are building.
If Twitch were smart, they would have just allowed the president on and like massively built up their platform.
Would have been great. Yeah.
You know,
Donald Trump playing Minecraft. What is this green guy doing? Why is he constantly trying to get me? I don't understand. That'd have been hilarious. Yeah. You know, I can. I pulled up a meme, but I guess there's no real reason to show it now. I guess we should just jump. Well, I want to show it anyway.
We're gonna show it.
show the meme
I love
anyway.
Yes.
memes. What does it say?
So when we were talking about libertarians and regulation, it's the libertarian ideas and libertarian candidates meme. You guys know this one?
Oh yeah.
There's. Have you ever seen it?
No.
It's this very beautiful and gorgeous fox, and it says
Silky
libertarian
fox.
ideas. And then the next one is this scraggly looking, all messed up Muppet. It says libertarian candidates.
I know
It's
what you're
taxidermied. Yeah.
I think it's funny, but the reason I wanted to pull it up is because we're actually talking about bad libertarian ideals.
yeah, no, I'm someone who used to be on the bleeding edge of libertarianism. I worked for the Seasteading Institute. I don't know
Oh.
if you're familiar with that,
Uh-uh.
but the idea was to build private islands that were private
Wow,
areas of
cool.
sovereignty to create
There's some
competition.
funny videos of libertarian will that.
Yeah, they're out there. You can find
Can we
them.
pull some of them up?
You can find them. I
They're-
mean, I
they're
was,
funny.
And then correct me if I'm wrong. The idea is to live outside of any government jurisdiction, and you make your own government at sea.
right, like in that the idea that just having seasteading, having
Yeah.
an environment where they can compete and people can move around between sovereignties very easily
Without the law.
would also just put competitive pressure on existing sovereigns to behave better. Right,
Yeah.
that was the idea. It doesn't work. It turns out. I don't think the precept works because there's no meaningful way to evade the sovereignty of major nations. Right, like you
Well-
can't just have a drug den offshore in the the United States and expect the federal
You just have
government
to have the
just
CIA
Well, hold
run
on.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you know
sure.
what Stiltsville? You know Stiltsville in Florida?
No, I don't know that.
So off the coast of Florida, it's actually not very deep. It's like you can walk very, very far out. And so, or, sort of walk. You actually, when you go out southeast of Miami, you have to be very careful when you're boating because you could crash into rocks. Like the water's not very, deep. But Stiltsville was where they built a bunch of buildings on stilts and were gambling and partying and drinking offshore from Miami because, there you go. You want to gamble? Found a place to do it, just in the water.
Yeah, I mean,
Thought this was America.
well,
That's right.
Huh? Right?
it's done ultimately with the tacit permission of the federal government.
This
right?
is funny. When people say this is America, they think that it's the land of the free. We were substantially less free, 100 years ago in a lot of ways. You probably know this better than I do, Will, but I believe our modern interpretation of free speech is fairly recent, like 1960.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been dramatically expanded. Although, I mean, there was still a lot of protection for it. There were some prosecutions that were really aggressive, like of the anarchists, I think,
And
you know,
Abraham
yeah.
Lincoln as well, when he
Right.
went after people for
Journalists.
Well, I
sedition.
mean, during the Civil War, we did a lot
Yeah.
of things that weren't exactly pro-liberty.
Yeah.
That
That's
said,
crazy. The Constitution became meaningless.
Well,
you know?
people
I mean,
died for
it's
their
a-
speech
like-
during the Civil War.
Well, I mean, think about the logistics of it. Like, you don't really think about it, but the entire North and the entire South were fighting, and the opposing capitals were 2 hours away by car, right? 100 miles away.
Yeah.
And so as a result, like, Washington, D.C. was very vulnerable, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's surrounded by slave state Virginia and then slave-friendly Maryland, right?
Yep.
Like, Maryland was a slave state. So it's surrounded by slave states. They were worried about their railroad connection
Yep.
being severed.
Abraham Lincoln was like, nah, none of that
Yeah,
Constitution.
so
for y'all.
there was like, I mean, they're like, we're in a war, you're rising up against us, we're not going to commit suicide.
Yep.
So you can say a lot of things. I mean, but Lincoln the tyrant. I know there's some weird like von Mises Institute stuff from like that's like Lincoln was actually a tyrant during the war. I'm like, he was in a civil war that was not obvious he was going to win, especially at the outset. They kept losing battles. They had a giant mob of tens of thousands of rebel soldiers as far north as. They got to Bull Run, which is
Gettysburg.
Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Yeah,
Man, that's like super far north of DC.
Right.
That's crazy.
and I mean, they ultimately lost, and they probably, there were times in their strategy, Stonewall Jackson, they wanted to attack Philadelphia, they wanted to attack the East Coast.
This is the crazy thing too about when you look at what Lincoln did. I'm pretty sure we're all kind of grateful he did it, but it's kind of scary at the same time.
Yeah,
You know, suspension of what habeas corpus, right? Just
Yeah.
arresting journalists.
I mean, it was the 1860s. It was a war. The federal government was so much weaker as a general matter. I mean, you know, this is also one of the things I don't like when people talk about, like, oh, we should have a revolution, a civil war. Like, one, civil war killed 5% of the American population. It was one of the worst things that ever happened to our country.
One of the bloodiest wars in history.
Yeah,
right?
like just in terms of the number of people who died. And second, our federal government is so much stronger now than it was then. I mean, the Southern armies literally, Southern forces just marched into federal armies and took the guns and weapons. That would never happen now. There's no way, like, any state militia would be able to summon the...
Well, but the issue is any modern civil war would be an actual civil war. The United States was particularly unique in its earlier stages, in that it was a bunch of states that viewed themselves as fairly equal to the federal government, and to some degree, or at least protecting of their own rights. When you look at some other countries that went through civil war, notably like Spain, it was just different areas adopting the ideology and taking a side. So what we would actually see in the event the U.S. did go to civil war is like when John Podesta had that war game where he said, if Trump wins, the West Coast secedes. It's not going to be like a federal armory and then the National Guard of Washington goes in. It's going to be the federal base is in Washington and is part of that
I don't
state.
think, I mean, but my point is, I guess, I don't think it'll be that easy for whatever side wants to rebel. I just don't. I think the federal government of the United States is still, even with all its confusion and incompetence, is the most powerful institution.
But it's not going to be one faction against the federal government. It's going to be the federal government split in half.
Yeah, see, I guess my point is I don't think that can really happen. There's federal control is consolidated, so it's literally like, what side does the army take?
Well, there's states like Texas that have a lot of National Guard troops located inside of them that are openly talking about secession. So.
Sure, but I think, I mean, that ultimately would end up being like guerrilla warfare. Like, you could see like guerrilla revolutionary type
insurgency.
stuff. Insurgency, but I don't think you could see anything resembling where you had like the Civil War was two armies, right? Of tens of thousands of people showing up in public and shooting at each other.
But look, but stop, like, don't think about it in terms of what America did in their Civil War, because it was very unique in terms of global Civil War. Mm. Back then, it was a bunch of different states with state identities.
Sure. Today,
we're the United States. Mm-hmm. Like, it's that line from National Treasure, one of the most brilliant quotes. A famous man. What's the character's name? Tom Gates or whatever, from, I don't know, Nicolas Cage's character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He said, before the Civil War, people would say the United States are. After the Civil War, they would say the United States is. It stopped being plural. The United States became the name of a single nation, mm-hmm. as opposed to a reference to different states.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's actually true. It's just from a movie. But the general idea, I think, to fit into this analogy is, right now, we are one country. The states' rights are relatively meaningless compared to what the United States is. People don't vote in local elections. I mean, they do, but most people don't even know who their congressperson is, or who their senator is, or who their state senator is, or who their mayor even is. Isn't that crazy? A lot of people, I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people probably have no idea who their mayor is or who their sheriff is.
Yeah.
So, but I'll tell you this, they probably know who, like, Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi, or at least heard of them. Federal level politicians have basically replaced local level politicians because we're becoming one country. So you look at the concern, I suppose, and it's reflected in the decisions being made in D.C. Mm-hmm. Why are they vetting the National Guard? Because they're scared that there are certain groups that are aligned with the Trumpism faction. They actually do fear that federal military forces might actually split. Or there could be, like, the way it happens isn't like one day a bunch of people in the Army or Marines or whatever say, we hereby declare ourselves for Trump Nation. What happens is confidence breaks. People don't have faith in the system from mass demoralization. They reject orders or are ordered to do, so they're ordered to do something they don't want to do. Maybe there's a bunch of, maybe there's a town in middle America and they're refusing this draconian lockdown, saying we refuse, our people are suffering, and then certain military are ordered to do something they don't want to do, and that causes a fracture. The Civil War took place over a decently long period of time. People look at history and they view it in a condensed matter, like all of a sudden it just happened. I think, what was it, like 20 years of strife, conflict, back and forth in government, until finally one congressperson caned the other guy. And then ultimately it led to, I think, 7 states seceded, and still we didn't have a civil war. It was only after this secession already happened, then Fort Sumter, when the Union refused to bring their troops out, After that happened, more states then broke away and it caused a rapid collapse. So in the event something does happen, I think people need to, for one, don't think it needs to be armies. Like it doesn't. It could be fifth generational warfare. We could literally just be in the modern equivalent. We use the internet, we use propaganda, it's information war. Or it could just be radically different than anything you've ever experienced.
Yeah, I won't rule that out.
I got to tell you, man, look, they're telling us right now that they're going to give us a $1,400 check. Well, I shouldn't say us because it's not coming to me, that's for sure. They're going to give the average working class person $1,400. I threw up my mouth a little bit when I heard that because I'm like, dude, I complained about the mass printing of money, but come on. Mm-hmm. The American people have been taken a boot up the butt from these lockdowns. The very least we can do is borrow from ourselves. I understand mass printing is bad, but if it's going to the people to essentially give them the ability to facilitate the economic exchange, then the debt is accrued by the American people to keep the machine churning. Instead, they're doing this mass printing of money, sending money overseas, and then not giving anything to the American people for like 6 months. At a certain point, someone's just going to go like, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore. They're going to go out their window and they're going to scream in rage. Or worse.
I mean, it could be. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm like, I don't think that's as likely as just sort of continued banal awfulness.
Well, another thing to really kind of consider here is I know a lot of people like to see this between the left and the right. I think it's even going to be beyond that. I think it's going to be elements of the left eating themselves. And I think that might even get pretty violent coming up because the level of this stain and unpopularity that this president has is huge. You look at the comments, you look at the responses, you look at, yes, he was the most voted for president in all of American history ever, but it doesn't really reflect on the excitement. There's no one excited about it. The only thing that they have now is this Trump gravy train it's on its last drips. They're still trying to milk it as much as they can with the 9/11 Commission about the insurgency and Trump, but that's not going to work. And there's going to be a lot of people pissed off, disenfranchised, and I think if there is going to be a further escalation of conflict, of violence, which again we should do everything in our power to prevent, I think it's first going to foment within the left versus the left, and I think that's going to lead a spark that's going to be very interesting. And I think that's maybe one reason why we have these troops still staying inside of the Capitol. So as far as the media wants to always keep dividing and conquering people, they have a debt of accountability. They overpromised and they're not going to deliver. And then people are going to realize that, and they're going to be very angry.
Well, that being said, we should go to Super Chats, huh?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you haven't already, smash the like button because it really, really does help. I think it's important people know that. Just interaction, commenting, just, engage with the channel. And subscribe, hit the notification bell, share the podcast if you really do like it. Don't forget to go to timcast.com, become a member, because we'll have a bonus segment up. I got to stop saying that. Bonus segment. It's exclusive segments of the show. Sometimes they go long. If we get into like a heated debate we did about religion, it went for an hour. It was so really fun. And we talked about, I think, what was the other one? I can't remember. Aliens or something. Mm-hmm. But we do that too. So now we're going to read comments from you. So get your Super Chats in. We'll try and read as many as we can. We got Justin Bartlett who said, doing my part to contribute to culture with a weekly podcast called The Dime Store Cinema. Tune in if you're tired of Rotten Tomatoes. Love you all.
Very cool idea. I like that.
All right, let's see what else we got. Matthew Hammond says, seize the endowments and the wealthy's investment nonprofits.
Oh, somebody's been reading my work.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so seize the endowments. I mean, I'm really tired of the universities. And I mean, I'm reading this book, Days of Rage. I mentioned this to you before the show, but it's about the 70s weather underground. And it's the same as Antifa, the same people. But here's the difference. They finally came out from underground, got like 3-month probation, and then they went to work as professors at universities.
Yep.
Shock.
Like Bill Ayers was a professor at UIUC. Bernadine Dorn was a law professor. These people were terrorists.
Yeah.
Terrorists.
Were terrorists?
I mean,
were?
I mean, who knows if they're still working on bombs, but...
well, no, I mean, the way I put it is like, if you eat some human, does that mean you were a cannibal, or are you a cannibal?
A fair question. I don't know.
But
if you kill one person, are you a murderer or were you a murderer?
Like, we're paying, if they work for a public university, taxpayers are paying for children to be educated by terrorists.
Yeah. Didn't Andrew Cuomo pardon a liberal activist bomber that's now working for BLM?
That was Clinton. Bill Clinton pardoned that person.
Bill Clinton, I think also Andrew Cuomo in a separate incident on a
Barack
separate
Obama
person.
pardoned Oscar Lopez Rafera, who was the head of the I forget exactly what the thing was, but it's the Puerto Rico Liberation Front. They attacked Congress. You want to talk about an insurrection? They literally shot up Congress.
Sure, but come on, Donald Trump pardoned Roger Stone. I mean, come on, that guy is like, he's like Dr. Evil.
I mean,
you know?
I did not like Trump's pardons. He pardoned Kwame Kilpatrick. They were terrible. He didn't pardon Assange,
He did pardon,
but he
yeah,
pardoned
right.
Kwame
He pardoned
Kilpatrick.
really bad people.
Yeah.
The
guy from Detroit.
New Jersey fraud doctor, the medical Melligan or something like that.
Blackwater mercenaries.
Oh
What the
God,
heck?
his pardons were
Disgusting.
awful. But
Yep.
but hey, he didn't pardon Puerto Rican terrorists.
Yeah, okay.
Who attacked Congress.
That's
I don't
fair.
know, man. That Roger Stone.
He's pretty bad.
He's so dangerous. They needed to raid his home with the FBI because they knew how big of a threat he
That
was.
was CNN.
Four-
With
four-
the help of CNN.
6 in the morning, and CNN had to be there. They had to
Yeah.
be, just in case, because we all know Roger Stone would come out guns a-blazing.
Dangerous dude.
He'd be like Rambo.
And they knew it because of their groundbreaking investigative journalism.
Yeah, that sounds right.
All right, let's see where we at. Not Bob Saget says Parler is a Fed honeypot. Also, Trump won MAGA. I don't think Parler is a honeypot. I don't think so. I think
no.
I think they're all tracking you and all spying. You know.
Yeah, that's
You're saying Trump
Everything's
won
a honeypot.
on a YouTube channel, and you think Parler's the honeypot? Like,
Yeah.
I think the FBI is reading the Timcast comments,
Yeah, I'm
guys.
pretty sure.
Yeah. Well, so Michael Malice tweeted something where he was like, to the TSA agent who recognized me from Timcast. He's like,
That was funny.
He's like, you were nice, but I hate your job, or something like that.
Thanks for being nice, even though I hate your job.
exactly.
Well, they're
Yeah.
not reading; they're databasing everything, and then if they need to go back, they will.
They sure can.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Astronaut Kitty says, is Ian laundering Tim's warehouse full of beanies? The warehouse is not full of beanies. It is full of our pillow. We have the very first prototype. If you want to see it, go to Instagram.com/Timcast. And it's the latest post breaking down our plan for the Our Pillow product line.
Groundbreaking.
We are going to be, when we do launch, we're getting the domain set up. We're going to be running ads for this. It will come in a box. It'll be a burlap sack in a box full of packing peanuts. And we're going to provide very detailed instructions on how you can build your own Our Pillow. So it's a very complicated process of pouring packing peanuts into the burlap sack and stapling it shut.
Yep.
And you think I'm joking. I mean, the whole thing is a joke for sure, but I'm going to build this website. I'm going to be selling these things, and it's going to be hilarious. And we're going to spray paint the Revolution fist on it,
I love it.
and we're going to make them prohibitively expensive.
Yes.
And then if people buy them, I'm just going to laugh. Because I guess if you want to get it, it's a luxury item, but it's like the most brutal pillow ever. We're doing it. It's happening. And we're going to have
excited.
tons of them. We have one. We have a prototype.
Our pillow.
Mavro St. John says, might not get seen, but I live in Portland, and I can confirm that any of the snow over here can throw the whole system out of whack. Anyone who stops emergency services are the real bad guys. Did you guys hear about that?
Yes.
They were stopping emergency services in Portland.
Antifa pushed snow up to the garage door of a police station so the vehicles couldn't get out.
Jail.
Evil.
Yes.
Like,
Believe
just-
it or not, right through jail.
Yes.
But no, here's the thing. Seattle is not equipped for snow. It never snows there, and it's extremely steep hills. When I lived there, it was a light flurry. The whole city shut down. Buses were stopping. People were being warned, like, keep your cars, brakes, wheels turned. A little bit of snow, and these hills are ridiculously steep. Cars start sliding down and crashing. So for people who live in Chicago, New York, or in the Northeast or whatever, people or in the Midwest familiar with snow probably think it's no big deal. They're like, oh, whatever, the police can just drive through it. Not in places like Seattle.
Yeah.
And Texas right now as well got that huge snow. They're not equipped for this. They're not going to invest heavily in snow infrastructure when it snows once every 10 years.
I guess Abilene's out of water right now.
Who is?
Abilene, the city of Abilene in
Texas?
has no water.
Well, there's
Yeah.
snow, right?
Yeah, they do have snow.
I guess you can
It's
eat
true,
that.
huh?
Nate Hammer says, CNN reported the FBI was having trouble bringing murder charges on February 2nd because there was no evidence of blunt force trauma.
Interesting.
And that's crazy. Doctor says, breaking. Sources close to Nancy Pelosi state she has admitted that she is actually Skeletor and resides in Snake Mountain with her best friend Chuck Schumer, a.k.a. Beastman. And together, Joe Biden, a.k.a. Mechaneck, will capture Castle Grayskull. And the source close to Nancy Pelosi is a homeless guy out back
Yeah.
who was about 50 feet away from her when she was talking. He told me everything.
I mean,
made that part up.
that's really big if it's true.
Big and true, indeed.
I could see it. I could see it being
Yeah.
true.
Bring me He-Man.
I'm with the homeless guy. on
I don't
this
know
one.
any lines from He-Man. I was too young for that. The sinister sibling says, "I'm just thinking now. We've got my pillow. We have our pillow. How long before someone makes mine pillow?" They actually did that. The left made a joke where they're
funny.
mocking Mike Lindell. Yeah. So we do have an actual our pillow, but it's just a design. If you go to timcast.com and click shop, it brings you to the store, and there's just a regular indoor throw pillow. And it's got a funny little graphic where like the my is crossed out and it says our.
Boring.
But we actually are going to be making our burlap sack our pillow kits. You have to make it yourself. We were originally going to send them to you assembled with, stapled shut. But then I figured it's probably more insulting to make you do the work. The point is the pillow is brutal. We do nothing for you and it's expensive, but it has the right ideology.
Yes.
So you have to buy it. Mm-hmm. All right. Sonny James says, FBI, CIA, a joke, been a joke. Now we are supposed to go to war with China. Why? Our own government and their state-owned media does to us what China does to the Chinese. Only difference, CCP is openly racist and selfish. You can't even defend your own property here. Yeah, man. Yep.
Yeah.
Cole Marshall says, Tim, you once talked about pots being used on places like Reddit in order to push certain ideas. You don't seem to reference it often. Why?
Oh,
Do you mean
bots?
You mean bots or sock puppets? I don't reference it often. I mean, when I need to reference it, I suppose I do, but I'm not going to randomly bring it up unless there's a reason to bring it up. But yeah, sock puppet accounts. They're called sock puppets. They're fake accounts that look like regular people, but they're, one guy will have 50 accounts and then claim it's, different people. Not Heisenbear says, I gave $500 to Sick Nick's GoFundMe. Maybe we can blame the stress of the situation on his death. I feel furious that I was lied to. Why wasn't the GoFund clear on his death, and why would you need anonymous sources for this story? The immediate defense from the left is, he had a stroke immediately following what happened. I'm sure that was unrelated. I mean, they said.
Do you have
they said
any
it was.
evidence of that claim? We don't. I mean, or is it the same anonymous law enforcement sources that lied to us in the first instance?
Right.
I
think when they said unrelated, it's because they assessed what caused the stroke and said it was unrelated. Did they just add that word for no reason? I suppose so. Ricky Bobby says, hey guys, thanks for all you do. Tim, FYI, the OK symbol, 100% a symbol representing white supremacy. For example, both correctional officers and inmates recognize it as such. Trust me, I would know. Just some insight. Maybe now it is. Maybe that's.
I mean, it's sort of, they memed it into being one. I remember,
Yeah, they did.
right?
And
it was
it started as a meme,
because
didn't
I think
it?
it was. Yeah, it was. I forget, Mike Ma or something like that. I think he was ultimately responsible for creating this 4chan meme to he was like, we're going to.
Trump did it.
Yeah. So we're going to deceive journalists into thinking that the OK symbol is a white supremacy meme. And journalists were like, well, that's really silly of you because now we can call you all white supremacists.
Yeah.
So that was
they don't
huge
seem
cell
to.
phone.
I've heard from so many of these people who think, yeah, but it's funny because they're dumb and they don't realize what it means. And I'm like, dude, the media knows what it means. They're laughing at you because you've given them a weapon to convince regular people who don't know what it means.
Yep.
Right.
Why would you do that? People don't understand optics and information war and propaganda. And the journalists were just like, oh, thank you so much for doing this. You're your own worst enemy. What's this? Gigi. At this point, TMZ has more credibility than NYT. That's the world we live in now. That tabloid papers are more likely to send reporters to investigate and find proof than the paper of record. Isn't that crazy?
Yep.
Well, this is actually, I want to bring Jordan in on this because Jordan did, actual journalism along with many other the Daily Caller people.
Yeah, we have
going to riots, and the New York Times was just sitting on their ass doing nothing.
New York Times reporter was in one of the riots that I wasn't at, but I heard this story from someone who's there, and the New York Times reporter left because it was unsafe. So the New York Times did not report what happened because they said it was not safe for the reporters to be there.
And was it like a leftist riot?
Yeah, it was one of the BLM riots.
Did they publicly write a story saying it was too dangerous?
Nope.
Being in
Of course not. Of course they didn't.
Yep. So what they do is they'll just grab tweets from the Daily Caller while simultaneously insulting them as a right-wing, far-right publication. Tucker Carlson's The Daily Caller, a far-right media outlet, had this tweet. That's why you know it's fake. BLM is peaceful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Lou Sassel says, we need to shift the culture with more truthful, factual documentaries and movies based on real events.
Yeah.
Use the power of presentation to red pill people seeking these genres of entertainment. That's yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I saw somebody suggesting we needed some very good docudramas about like the Red Guards in China and the Cultural Revolution.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I know Poland did something on Katyn. We should be doing something in English on the Katyn massacre. A lot of things you can do.
So we have Justin G, who says, please stop saying assault rifles. That is not a real term. The media made it up. It means nothing. And full auto guns are not illegal. Look into it, please. All right, let's issue some clarifications. The term assault rifle originated in Nazi Germany. It was created, I believe Hitler coined the term himself. And so assault rifle is a reference to a selective fire rifle with single burst and full auto. Assault weapon is a term that is relatively meaningless. Assault rifle itself may have been made up a long time ago, but it does reference something specific. As for full auto guns not being illegal, right, what the point I'm making is that selective fire rifles are illegal, but they're not illegal if you go through the arduous task, depending on which weapon it is. I think you can get like an M16. You got to fill out, what does it look like? The tax stamp. What is it called? The class 3 form or something?
Yeah.
They're prohibitively expensive. You can't make them. So just to clarify, what I mean by them not being legal is there's no new versions of civilian full auto. You can buy existing ones by going through a relatively circuitous process that takes a very long time to do. And then you actually can own these like sometimes ridiculously powerful crew-served, belt-fed machine guns. And I went to an event. There's an event called DEF CON. It's a hacker convention. And they do this thing where they go in the desert, they go into the Mojave, and they just have a shooting range they set up. It's a whole lot of fun. And one guy brought some belt-fed full auto, and he was like, as long as you pay for the ammo, you can shoot all you want. It's expensive because, you know, at the time, I can't remember exactly. I think it may have 7.62 maybe. So at the time, it may have been like $1 around. Probably not. Probably like 50 cents. I don't know. I know the prices now are getting ridiculously expensive, but you go to the range today and people are like, I don't want to shoot that much because bullets are too expensive. Like they're hard to come by, short supply.
I mean, if it's $1 a bullet and you shoot, how many bullets a minute would that thing shoot? Like 300,
I mean, you're spending like
200?
$100 for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah. Today, it's particularly crazy. There's a lot of ammo that is insanely expensive because it's just, you can't get it. Mm-hmm. It's nuts. Like, I think 30-30, you know, not particularly common to be completely honest, but it's like $4 for one bullet. You're like, you want to shoot your rifle and you have a 30-30, you know, Winchester or whatever. It's like, wow, man.
Yeah.
But you can still get some good price if you know where to look, I suppose. But it's getting up there, man. Osiris Cleaning LLC says you can't have guns in D.C. because it's U.S. territory. The amendments were meant to protect the citizens of several states from the federal government.
That's false.
Yeah, that's a federal constitution.
The Second Amendment applies to the federal government. The right of a free people to bear arms shall not be infringed.
Tell that to D.C.
Right, like that's the idea that it's because it's the Constitution. There are areas where, like the 14th Amendment was targeted primarily at the states in the aftermath of the Civil War. That was passed in 1865. The Second Amendment was part of the Bill of Rights, passed with the Constitution. Like that's just wrong. Sorry, sorry, commenter, but you are incorrect.
Someone's wrong on the internet?
Oh,
no.
Shocking,
Yeah.
Twisted Ninja says, does anyone remember that time that Andrew Cuomo murdered all of those old people and covered it up instead of using the floating hospital that the president sent?
I remember.
Yeah.
Oh, and I figured out why.
we now know the reason he covered it up was because he was worried Trump would launch a federal investigation and it would help Trump win. Mm-hmm. Wow.
So it's Trump's fault.
Yeah,
Oh,
of course, yeah.
Oh, right. It's kind of crazy that we just see it all happening right in front of our faces. The corruption, you know?
It's just
Like
more
murder, man. Murder.
like
He killed these people.
His press conference today, he was like,
Yeah.
we reported all the deaths. Or we reported the deaths. Or he said something really like twisted and weird in this press conference. It was a disaster.
I think he said something akin to, they're old people, they die.
Who cares?
Yeah, he said, who cares?
something
They
akin to
die.
that.
Did they
Yeah.
die in a hospital, a nursing home? Who cares?
Oh my
these
god.
people are
Who
sociopaths.
cares?
Everyone cares. My goodness.
Philip Somnit says, hey, Tim, love the show. I'm giving up YouTube for Lent, so I won't be able to watch for a while. Keep telling the truth. Whoa
man.
there, my friend. If you can't watch on YouTube, go to timcast.com and become a member for exclusive segments. But more importantly, all of this content from my other YouTube channels, youtube.com/Timcast and Timcast News, they're on iTunes, Spotify, all the podcast platforms. And this show is actually on iTunes, Spotify, and all that as well. So if you want to just listen to the show, we put them up immediately after the show. Just listen on the podcast.
Yeah.
Then you don't got to go anywhere. Andrew says, you talked about HR 127. Please look up HR 1.
Oh.
Yeah, what is that? Do you guys know?
That's the election reform one.
Right.
The national vote by mail stuff.
The national Republicans never win an election again. Is that what it is?
Yeah. It's weird how they want to do that after winning. It's almost like they want to wield their power to prevent Republicans from ever having power again.
That sounds right.
You know.
Bottled Water says, do you need someone to focus on the UFO UAP task force? There is a lot going on, and if you want someone to help, let me know. I think we're planning on expanding and doing more podcasts. So we have just timcast.com for now, but the goal is to actually make more websites. And we want to launch a weird and I don't know what the right way to describe it is, but we want to talk about crazy conspiracies and ancient aliens and UFOs, but from like a rational skeptic kind of perspective. So, I think too much of the enthusiasm around a lot of these things is very much desperately wanting to believe it. So like ghost hunting, for example, they have like the electromagnetic frequency detectors. Like, who determined that tracks ghosts? You just randomly decided to grab something. No, I want like a rational approach to what is paranormal phenomenon. Do we have experts and scientists who can tell us why is it that people experience these things? I'll tell you one thing. They say that ultra low frequencies could be a reason why people have like hauntings or ghost sightings, because there's something that's causing this ultra low frequency sound to go through you, which can mess with your brain. And then, so people in specific areas might see ghosts when it's really just natural phenomena. We want to explore that stuff. So the answer is absolutely, maybe. We have jobs at timcast.com. Admittedly, it's not on the front burner right now, so I don't know who's going to get to it, but we're trying to build as much as we can. We have a lot going on that's making things relatively difficult. Joe Spinella says, original intent of the Second Amendment clearly states, I should have the same long rifle as my standing army and cannot be infringed, period. That doesn't change. Government doesn't have the rights and cannot administrate my property. Well, there's a lot of people with guns in uniforms who will stop you if you try to defend your rights in certain areas. It's absolutely insane. Bare arms, literally holding it and walking around.
Well, I mean,
Gone.
so to a slight correction there, right? Like the Fifth Amendment says the government cannot take your property without due process. It doesn't say it cannot take your property.
Right.
Like people often forget, how does the government have the power to do this? Like people ask me how the government has the power to regulate big tech. I mean, like, have you read the Commerce Clause? It's a big ol' power. Think of the taxing power, a big ol' power. It says the government has the right to tax you. And so it has a lot of power. It has constraints on that power. And really, the way to think about it is the powers are generally in the Constitution itself, and the restrictions, the limitations on that power are in the Bill of Rights. And so the Second Amendment is one key limitation.
Well, there you go. Gareth Green says, Pool, Sunbay, and friends. I support the right of any private property owner to discriminate on whatever basis they like. No one has the right to step foot on property they do not own. There is no right to a motel room. We must tolerate that legally.
That's a normative claim that's wrong. Right? Like, I guess, no, I shouldn't say wrong. Just
Disagree?
I disagree, like, vehemently. And I think that I think it's okay to say that actually, no, I don't think you should be able to turn away people from your hotel because they're black. I think that's wrong and immoral, and I think it's perfectly legitimate for government to put a stop to it and to make that behavior illegal.
I think, I've really thought about why we had these laws. And when I read your story about Lyndon Johnson, it made me kind of realize if you want to create a community somewhere on an island, or it's getting increasingly difficult to do because the world is just a lot of people and jurisdictions have been formed. So I understand that argument. That makes things tough. But even if you go to the middle of nowhere, people argue this. Yeah, well, even if I go to like the mountains, the government still comes for me. And I'm like, because you're still in a country guarded by all the missiles that all our taxes pay for and everything. So look, I get it. It's rough. We were born into a system paying a subscription fee. But the way I see it is you get 16 years of essentially partially free living where people contribute to your existence. You get to use the roads, the sidewalk. You get to go to schools and it's paid for through public, contributions, and only then do you have to enter the workforce and start contributing taxes to that system. I think the best argument against taxes is that no one ever chose this, but
you didn't choose your parents either,
right?
And they have the right to discipline you.
And I think that, you really can go out into the middle of nowhere and kind of do whatever you want. I think people who argue that probably have never done that. Like,
I mean,
within reason. I mean, obviously, look, we talked about the story where a guy had a tank with a full auto 50 cal, like 50 BMG. And I can't remember where he was, but the police got a call of like he was shooting into a lake. The cops pulled up. The guy stopped shooting, waved, and asked if there was a problem. And they go, "This your property?" And he goes, "Yes, sir." And they're like, "Have a nice day." And they left. Like, you can live in the middle of nowhere with a tank with 50 BMG full auto, and so long as you take care of all the legal process to it, nobody really cares you're doing it.
I mean, we still ultimately do live in a very free country, and I mean, I'm trying to fight to preserve those freedoms and have them be meaningful, in areas like social media. But yeah, we shouldn't forget. I mean, this is as free as there haven't been many freer countries in the United States. That's still true.
And historically speaking as well. And when you travel around the world, you really do realize the few freedoms that we have, we should value and protect at all costs.
And I mean, it's also one other thing to be scared of is a weak sovereign. Like that Somalia, people are like, well, Somalia is great. No, Somalia is bad.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
No, I've been there. I've been there. It's not nice.
It's not nice. Nothing worse than living under a weak sovereign that is in the middle of a civil war. I mean, your rights are constantly changing depending on which warlord is ascendant.
Remember when Conan O'Brien went to Haiti to prove that Trump was wrong, and he went to like this luxury resort with armed guards and then filmed himself in the water? Like, it's great here. It's like, dude. Wasn't there like an earthquake that led to a massive, like the UN caused a cholera outbreak and then like covered it up? Nice. Like Al Jazeera broke that story.
Isn't it interesting how whenever some lib wants to prove that some terrible place is actually wonderful, they show you a photo of the ocean, which is not the country.
Right. Like there's a bunch of water.
Anna Navarro did that. She's like, Africa is so wonderful, view of the ocean. How about you turned around and look at the actual country and show
well, Luke did that.
No, I was like, I did a full documentary about Somalia.
That's what I mean. You showed the country.
The honesty of it.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that. It was good.
I was on the beach. I was on the beachfront too, and met a Canadian there. It was kind of weird, but met a lot of crazy, interesting people, even expats who moved away from the West back to Somalia.
I was in Thailand covering the monarchists versus the parliamentary uprisings, and I was with some vice journalists. This one vice journalist was telling me what was going on and explaining how she overheard someone yell, "F the king," and then immediately went, like covered her mouth, realized it doesn't matter what the context is in Thailand. If you say any string of words that disparage the royal family, it's called lèse majestés, and it's a crime.
Yeah, lèse majesté.
Majest, is that what it is? Yeah, you go to jail for that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Even saying, "I can't believe someone said F the king," you're under arrest. You said those words. That's crazy. I don't want to live in a place like that.
There.
I remember flying.
Fun to visit.
I remember flying out of Thailand, and as the plane is on the tarmac, the stewardess goes on the intercom. She's like, "I'm so sorry. I regretfully inform you, our king has died." And then it was the time when there was a transition. No. This was 6 months after the fact. So I'm flying there, and she's like, "I'm so sorry. Oh, my God." And we're taking off like, what the hell's going on here? And she's like, "Our supreme leader has died." And I'm like, "Okay. Can I go back to sleep now?"
Okay.
So it was long after, but still they had this mourning period, which was extremely long.
Yeah. So. And I will say, too, I'm probably pronouncing the name wrong, but King Bhumibol was apparently a really awesome guy. He was trying to bring literacy to the poor and really help them out, and people really did love him. Even the people who were protesting against him, the ones who would absolutely disparage the monarchy in violation of the law, would actually be like, "But we really do like the king. He's a good dude. We just need to change the system." So even the people who didn't like it were very much like, he's red. Now his son's taken over, and that sentiment's kind of changed. When we were working on a documentary for Vice, they kept throwing it back to us because they were like, "The way you've described the king's son is illegal in Thailand." And we were like, "Why?" We were pointing out other people have criticized him. Like, you can't do that. So we had to find ways to critically compliment him, like make it sound like it's positive, but it's actually not. Mm-hmm. And it was really, really funny. Like, I can't remember exactly what we said, but we said some view him not as a god, but as a demigod. And that was supposed to be, I was like, What is this?
Yeah, doesn't he have like a team of concubines? Right? Is that
I don't
the same
know.
person? I remember hearing
but,
some wild stuff. In
I
Thailand.
don't mean that was older Thailand, not recently though.
I don't know.
But I'll tell you this. Apparently, even me just telling you the story means I can't go back to Thailand.
Oh.
But it's fine because I was explicitly told after doing that documentary I was never able to go back there again. Like, I was advised by security organizations, like, you don't want to go there because the doc we did actually got a bunch of traction and they mocked, like, it made the monarchists look really bad, I guess. So they were like, yeah, they're not going to want you back. And if you go, they might try and, so you shouldn't go to Thailand ever again. I'm like, all right, well, I'm grounded.
He has a team of concubines. It's
The current one.
Yes.
Who was it who had, was it Gaddafi?
shoot,
he had those,
that
like,
is- Oh, it's okay.
those lady assassins.
He had like a blonde Swedish nurse.
Gaddafi?
Gaddafi. Yes, that was his
How
like
funny.
main chick.
Who
His
was it?
Bottom.
But was it
family from the
Mubarak?
show.
Which one had all of those like female assassin type guards?
That was the I think North Korean leader, wasn't it?
No. It was one of the North African dictator guys.
No, I don't
Yeah,
remember.
was it
Doesn't ring a
Mubarak?
bell. Maybe someone in the comments will tell
Yeah,
us. But
well.
Gaddafi, he had a very bodacious nurse.
Bodacious? What does that
Wow.
mean?
You know.
I don't know, I love it.
She had
Endowed?
she was well endowed
Yes, there you go. Beautiful.
with bazongas.
Readout Production says, have you heard of the West Virginia mine wars? A culmination of labor disputes in the early 1920s started with a shootout in a town that opposed coal companies, ended in largest U.S. insurrection since Civil War. I didn't know about that.
I don't know if it ended in. I mean, if it ended in civil war, I know there was like rebellions and it was put down by the federal government big time. I think.
Al Favre, I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I'm sure, says, please try to get Maj Toure on the show. He's an amazing dude. Black Guns Matter founder for training for firearms for minority communities. Ran for office as a libertarian in Philly, super intelligent. And we did have him on the
We
show.
had him.
Yeah, he's a rad dude.
Yes.
Yeah, he's cool.
I
Yeah.
want to come on with a libertarian sometime and argue with them.
Do it.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
Maj.
that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Black Guns Matter.
Well, I mean, on that point, I agree with them. I
Yeah,
don't really
for
have any, like, you know.
We can hit up
get some
Robbie.
Cato get Robbie on. We'll do another
Yes.
debate.
Robbie's cool, dude.
I like
We
Robbie.
argued. Yeah, he's a pretty rad guy. I just completely disagree with him on the regulation thing. But other than that, he's pretty spot on.
Right, like he's not the only person who's wrong about something. You know?
Yeah.
That's fair.
He got the Covington thing. He was one of the only journalists to actually get Covington right.
Yeah, he nailed that one.
Bobcat says, Tim, would you hire someone whose only journalistic experience is serving in an Army recon unit, then joining a private intelligence company for beer money in college? If so, where do I send my resume? That's actually a really
Sounds
good
great.
resume.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Would you hire someone only with extensive recon? What?
Sure, yeah, no, that's
Well, when we start hiring, I don't know, building this thing out is kind of a go with the flow thing. And, to be completely honest, we're just absolutely swamped with launching our pillow company. It's our pillow company, and we're going to run these ads. I'm trying to see if Ryan Long wants to help put together the commercial, and hopefully we can just do more ridiculous things. I just got to say this. I was thinking about, I tweeted at Elon Musk a while ago. I don't know if you guys saw this. I asked him, I said, hey, Elon Musk, why haven't you built an Iron Man suit yet? And he responded, building Starship. And then I responded, that is an acceptable response. Like, I have nothing to say to that. Just like, all right. Because that was kind of the point I was making. Like, yo, you're the super rich guy. Like, where's the cool Batman stuff? And he's like, I'm building a Starship. And I'm like, he's literally doing it. All right, well, where's anyone else doing anything interesting to, like, kind of shake up the system a little bit, not in a crazy, violent way, or just kind of in a funny way to make things interesting, like, the pillow thing,
I mean, are we all just kind of demoralized right now? Just because, I think we're going to start doing that. It's been weird. You think about how our whole country kind of, the combination of COVID and Trump made our whole country focus on politics in a way that I think it never had before.
Yeah.
Team sports got way less popular. Its ratings went
Still,
down.
yeah.
Still.
Shut down, yeah.
And so politics kind of replaced sports for a lot of people as their primary mode of consumption. But it's ultimately not like what produces innovation, certainly.
I was thinking, where's the silly commercial? Where's the silly billboard? Where's the, just like the interesting the weird, life's so boring. No one does anything, It's like everything's so predictable. Let's make, you know what? I think we'll sell a bunch of these pillows. I got to be honest. They're not bad. No joke. Like, packing peanuts in a burlap sack surprisingly works.
I like
I had
it.
a lot of people tell me like, dude, I think you think it's bad, but it's probably going to be a really cool pillow, like in terms of temperature, because it's foam and the heat's going to dissipate very easily through the holes of the burlap. It might be a little rough laying on because, it's burlap, but probably comfortable. And I tried it out.
You could maybe make it a linen bag or something like that.
Well,
and
it's
actually
Maybe
improve
replace the packing peanuts. I think that would be.
Replace them with what?
with Mike Lindell's patented fill.
That's right. That's the packing thing. Yeah.
I don't know. Packing peanuts are dirt cheap.
True.
And all we got to do is send people a box with a folded up burlap sack with the revolution fist on it in a box of packing peanuts and instructions and a warning not to use it as a pillow. And we take no responsibility for anything that happens to you for keeping this.
I don't think the FTC is going to be okay with that. Sorry.
Saying what? Don't use it as a pillow?
Yeah.
We're going to have to get a lawyer and make sure we go through it properly.
Right. You might have to rename the product. Or quasi pillow. Yeah, I mean, because you call something a pillow in the title, and then you say, but we don't.
You can't use it.
You
as
can't
a
use it
pillow.
as a pillow. That's going to be like just trade deception.
Really?
Sounds familiar to other.
What if on the website we just have something that says very clearly, this is a joke, it's a gag product, you can absolutely buy and do whatever you want with. Just
This is
recognize.
why we need
you
less
have to be
regulations.
very clear about that?
Like when they're buying it, I'll say, this is literally a burlap sack packed with packing peanuts. If you want to sleep on that, by all means do it. We're just trying to be ridiculous with this, and
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that would work. You
What
just
if they
gotta,
spell pillow incorrectly? Spell it with
There you
one
go.
L.
With a U.
that wouldn't
That'll
solve
no.
the issues. That wouldn't solve the problems.
Right. Yeah, we were brainstorming ideas for the commercial, and I was like, no, we still have legal requirements on even though it's clearly meant to be ridiculous, it doesn't matter because some people might not understand that.
Right.
So, because I had one person suggest you should say all proceeds will go to some charity or whatever, and I was like, no, we can't do that. I'll have to say all proceeds go to me so I can buy stuff that I want.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's literally what we'll do with it.
You don't want to be deceptive, right? I mean, actually, that's that's kind of how the whole Bannon fraud case happened in Southern District of New York, right? They went out and publicly said nobody was going to get paid, and then Brian Colfage ended up getting paid.
Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna jump over to the exclusive members only segment coming up at timcast.com. So go there, sign up. And in maybe about an hour or so, the next bonus segment will be live, and you can check us out there. Don't forget to follow me on. Now you can follow me on Parler, assuming you can get it to load properly at Timcast. And you can check out my other YouTube channels, youtube.com/Timcast, youtube.com/TimcastNews. This show is live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So we'll be back tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe, smash that like button, hit that notification bell. Will, do you want to give any shout outs to anything?
Yeah, check out the latest pieces of Human Events. We got a couple of pieces up from Charlie Kirk and David Creighton on the impeachment that are pretty solid. And please, youtube.com/Human Events. We're trying to build our own channel.
Right on.
So,
Jordan.
Buy our pillow.
That's
Our
right.
burlap sack.
Thanks for promoting my company. Did you have anything? All right, sure, fine. Luke, anyway. No, I'm kidding. Do you want to mention your social media? Or
Your Twitter.
Yeah, I'm Jordy Lancaster on Twitter and dailycaller.com, Jordan Lancaster. I write every day, so go read me if you're interested.
Cool.
We also forgot to mention that today is a holiday for people who violated the Constitution. I think it's important to bring that up. If you like puppies, check out my Instagram.
Well, hold on.
Yes?
The Constitution didn't exist for the first few presidents, so they couldn't have violated it.
Well,
That's
most of the the people that violated
I don't
the
think that's true.
The
I think
Constitution was written when?
1789.
And George Washington was president when?
I'm pretty sure it's starting in 1789.
Really?
I don't think he was.
Sure.
I think so. I think Will's right on
I
this
think
one.
I
I'm going to
think
say
I don't
yes.
think there
I
was a
trust him.
president
I'm
in the
going to say
Articles
yes,
of Confederation
and,
system.
from my own personal opinion, based on no facts or evidence at all.
That's right.
I think so. So, what's the verdict on this one?
No, yeah, Will's right.
Will's correct.
You mean Luke was initially
Can you
right?
say that
Yeah.
one more
You fact
time? Because
checked Luke
I love
incorrectly.
hearing that phrase.
never
Oh,
wrong.
he'll
Yeah.
never shut up on this.
Anyway,
We'll
back
get
onto
retarded.
more.
Did you hear I'm right?
Back onto more serious
actually,
matters.
So actually, the effective date was just before George Washington.
Interesting.
Just about 1 month was when they were like, okay, we got to have a constitution.
So
because-
Will's correct.
Yes, Will is absolutely
Back to
correct.
more important matters. If you like puppies, my Instagram, Look
Puppies,
We Are
yes.
Change, is where to go. The T-shirt I'm wearing is a picture of George Orwell that says, "Boy, did I call it." You could get yours on thebestpoliticalshirts.com, and of course, I'm a YouTuber, so check me out on We Are Change. Thanks for having me.
That's correct. I do include Luke's on YouTube in the description of all our videos that include him, because that seems like a nice thing to do since he is helping us out. He's a wonderful guest. I am Sour Patch Lids on Twitter and Minds, and I'm Real Sour Patch Lids on Instagram and Gab. And I will hand it over to Tim.
We'll be over at timcast.com in the members only section coming up in about an hour. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we will see you all there.
Bye, guys.